There's a moment in the third chapter of Avatar, The Last Airbender, in the episode called The Southern Air Temple, where Aang wanders into a back room of the place he grew up and finds the skeleton of his father figure curled at the center of a ring of Fire Nation skeletons. The show holds on that image. A small boy from a culture of pacifists is shown, without warning, the precise shape of his guardian's last fight. It is the third episode of a children's cartoon, and it is not even close to the most disturbing thing this show does. Tonight on Ember, we are going through all of it. The bloodbending, the brainwashing, the burned villages, the genocide woven through the world building. The moments that are scary in ways most family programming is simply not allowed to be. So get comfortable, turn the lights down, and if you haven't subscribed, it really does help us keep making these. We'll be here a while. Let's start at the beginning, because the beginning is where this show first quietly tells you what kind of story it is going to be. In the third chapter of Book 1, Aang returns home. He has been frozen in the iceberg for 100 years, and he does not yet believe what Katara has tried gently to tell him. He thinks the Air Nomads will still be there. He thinks Monk Gyatso will still be there. He glides up to the Southern Air Temple in the cold, thin air, and the camera shows you a place that looks abandoned but not destroyed. The architecture is still standing, the statues are still standing, the wind chimes still move. The show does not lead with violence, it leads with absence. There is no one. The first horror of Avatar, The Last Airbender, is silence in a place built for people, and the show knows exactly what it is doing by letting you feel that silence before it shows you a single body. When Aang finally finds Gyatso in a room that is supposed to be private, the camera moves slowly and the colors mute. Gyatso is not posed. He is not holding a sword. He is not gripping a weapon. He is not the center of a heroic last stand. He is a small bundle of robes around a skeleton, surrounded by other skeletons in red armor. The show does not need to say what happened. The room is the sentence. The argument here is that this is a culture of monks, gentle, vegetarian, peaceful, and the very last conversation those armored soldiers had on this earth was a conversation with one elderly airbender, and they all died in this small room together. Aang does not understand at first what he is looking at, and the show, mercifully, does not narrate it for him. He just lowers his head, he says nothing, and then the tattoos light up. What follows is one of the first appearances of the Avatar state in the series, and it is presented not as a power-up but as a grief response. The wind howls, the dust rises, Aang screams without screaming, and the temple itself seems to inhale, and the boy at the center of it is so small. Read this way, the show is telling you that the Avatar state is not a triumphant transformation. It is what happens when a child runs out of room to hold what he is holding. It is the first time, but not the last, that you will see Aang's eyes go white and feel something closer to fear than excitement. The show implies, through this scene and through every quiet aside that follows, that Aang is the last airbender in a literal, total, almost unbelievable sense. There are no others hiding in mountains. There are no surviving sects somewhere on a distant continent. The Fire Nation, under Fire Lord Sozin, used the rise of Sozin's Comet to launch a coordinated military campaign that erased the Air Nomads from the world. It is presented in the show with a kind of careful, almost archival horror. It is a genocide, and the word is not softened by the writing. It is the founding event of the series. Everything that comes after, every kingdom in negotiation, every friendship Aang makes, every fight he chooses to soften, is built on top of that founding event. The Air Nomads in their entirety were murdered. The temples were left standing because the temples were not the target. The people were. There is something particular about how the show frames the comet. In the very last chapters of Book 3, Sozin's Comet is invoked again, this time by Sozin's grandson, Fire Lord Ozai, who plans to use its power to do to the Earth Kingdom what his ancestor did to the Air Nomads. The show is direct about this. It says, in plain language during the war meeting that Zuko attends, that the plan is to burn it all down, to level the forests, scorch the towns, kill or scatter what survives. The comet, in the world of Avatar, is not really a celestial event. It is a weapon that arrives every 100 years on a predictable schedule, and the worst people in the world tend to plan their lives around it. That is the world that opens with a small boy finding his father figure's skeleton. That is what the show is asking you to hold, and it asks you to hold it not in a season finale or a special episode, but in Chapter 3. By the time you have learned the names of the 4 nations and the rules of bending, you have already been told that one of those 4 nations is essentially extinct, and that the people who did the extinguishing are the antagonist of the story, and that the protagonist is the only survivor and he is 12. None of this is hidden. The genocide is the bedrock. What makes the Southern Air Temple sequence so quietly devastating, even on rewatch, is how lightly the show touches it on its way to other plots. The bones are not lingered on, the screams are not played for shock. The episode moves on. Aang makes friends with a lemur. There is a chase. There is, eventually, a kind of peace. And the show trusts you to know what you saw. It does not underline. It does not lecture. It will, later, give you survivors of other tragedies. Communities that limped through the war, families that found each other again. But the Air Nomads do not get that arc. The show is honest about it. The temples remain empty. Aang's culture, his clothes, his food, his music, his airball games, the small rituals he tries to teach his friends. None of it has anyone left to share it with him. There is no airbender mother somewhere waiting for him. There are no surviving classmates. The horror of the Southern Air Temple is not that he finds Gyatso's bones. The horror is that those bones are the closest thing to family he is going to get in the present tense of the show. From a child finding bones in a temple, we drift into one of the most genuinely frightening single episodes in the series. An episode that the show titles, with unusual bluntness, The Puppet Master. It is a Book 3 episode, and it takes the form of a horror story. The group arrives in a small Fire Nation village in the woods. The innkeeper, an elderly woman called Hama, takes them in and feeds them and is kind. Katara is drawn to her because Hama, it emerges, is one of the few people on this side of the world who can still understand a particular dialect, the dialect of the Southern Water Tribe, because Hama herself was born there. She is a Southern Water Tribe waterbender, one of the very last. And here the show begins, very slowly, to slide from cozy to wrong. The villagers tell stories about people disappearing on the night of the full moon. Hama smiles at the table. The mountain looms behind the inn. There is a cave. There is, eventually, a flashback. And the show, which is supposed to be a family adventure, becomes, for one chapter, something close to a ghost story about what war does to the people who survive it. What you learn in that flashback is that Hama was captured by the Fire Nation many decades before the events of the series, during the long Fire Nation raids on the Southern Water Tribe. She was thrown into a prison built specifically to neutralize waterbenders. They kept her dry. They kept her thirsty. They denied her any access to the element of her people because their entire technology of control was built around the idea that a waterbender without water was a person without weapons. And alone in her cell, over years, Hama did something the show is careful to present as the discovery of a truth that was always there. She realized that the human body, like every living thing, is mostly water. And on nights when the moon was full and her bending was strongest, she began, very slowly, to learn how to move that water, the water inside another person, the same way she had once moved water in a river. This is the invention of bloodbending in the world of Avatar. The show is explicit. It was invented in a cell by a woman as the only escape from a torture meant to break her. She used it on her guards. She walked out, and then she did not stop. The horror of the episode is not the technique itself. It is that Hama has been using it on the villagers. The people disappearing on full moons have been taken by her, into the mountain, into the cave, where the show frames her not as a vengeful soldier but as something far stranger, an old woman who has been at war for so long, in private, against an enemy she has long since outlasted, that the war has become her only language. When Katara confronts her at the climax, in a clearing under the full moon, Hama bloodbends Katara's own brother. Sokka is lifted off the ground by his blood. His joints bend wrong. He cannot speak. And Katara, who is herself one of the most powerful waterbenders in the world, is forced into a decision that the show, for once, allows to land with full weight. She bloodbends Hama back. She uses the technique. She forces the old woman to her knees. And Hama, at the end, smiles. Because the show has made the argument gently and clearly that the worst thing the Fire Nation did to Hama is not that they imprisoned her, but that they taught her to do this, and now Katara knows how to do it too. The technique escapes its inventor, the contamination spreads. The episode ends with Katara crying, and the show gives her nothing to do with the crying. There is no comforting speech. There is no moral resolution. The moon goes down and they leave the village. And what Katara knows now, she will know for the rest of her life. It is one of the most adult endings in a children's show that I can think of. The Puppet Master is also, read this way, one of the show's quiet thesis statements about war. The interpretation here is that no one comes out of a 100-year conflict clean, that the survivors are themselves haunted in ways the victors will never have to acknowledge, and that the techniques developed under torture do not disappear when the torturer dies. Hama is presented as a victim. She is also presented as a monster. The show does not pretend that those two readings cancel each other out. They sit on top of each other, the way bloodbending sits on top of waterbending, the way the cave sits underneath the village. And it is in the small details that the episode is most effective. The way Hama's hands rest on her lap, the way she pours tea, the way she calls Katara dear. The horror of the Puppet Master is that she does not look like a villain. She looks like someone's grandmother. She is someone's grandmother. And she has been waiting in the woods with a technique she invented in a prison for someone like Katara to walk in the door so she can finally pass it on. That is the real disturbance. Not the bending, but the inheritance. From the Puppet Master's cave, we drift down to a different kind of cave, a wider one, with green lanterns and a much larger machine of control operating below the surface of a city the size of a country. In the second half of Book 2, the group arrives in the Earth Kingdom capital of Ba Sing Se. The walls are vast, the trains run on time, the tea is good, and everything about the city, on first impression, is presented as comfort. They have a house, they have neighbors. There is a sense, briefly, of an ordinary life. The show takes its time. The first sign that something is wrong is the way no one talks about the war. There is, you learn, a city ordinance against it. The word simply is not said. There are no refugees officially. There is no front officially. There is a thing called the Ju-Di. She is the guide assigned to greet new arrivals, and she has a wide, fixed smile and a flat voice. And her name, you slowly realize, is not actually her name. It is the title of a role. There are many Ju-Dis. They are interchangeable. When one Ju-Di is taken away, another arrives, with the same smile and the same flat voice, and the show, in one of its most unnerving sequences, simply lets the substitution happen without comment. What is operating underneath all of this is a secret police force called the Dai Li, founded originally as protectors of the city's culture, who have over generations become the enforcers of a totalizing silence. They live underground, they wear long sleeves and broad hats, and they earthbend stone gloves onto their hands, and they extract people from their homes in the middle of the night, and they take them to a chamber beneath a lake outside the city, Lake Laogai, where the brainwashing is done. The show is calm about this. It does not present it as fantasy. It presents it as the ordinary administrative work of a long peace. The Dai Li take dissidents and refugees and people who have noticed things, and they take them to a chair in a small circular room, and a lantern spins, and a voice tells them over and over that there is no war in Ba Sing Se. And by the time they leave, that statement is something they believe. There is a sequence in the chamber where Jet, the freedom fighter from Book 1 who had grown up in his own war, is shown receiving this conditioning, and the camera lingers on his face as the lantern circles. The argument the show is making is that brainwashing is not magic. It is repetition. It is patience. It is a chair, a light, and the time to keep someone in it. This is also where, in one of the most devastating quiet beats in the series, Jet dies. The group goes down into the underground chamber to confront Long Feng, the head of the Dai Li, and Jet fights at their side. He is struck, he is left, broken against a wall, and Katara stays with him, and Toph, whose earthbending lets her sense vibrations and therefore lets her sense heartbeats, says quietly that he is going to be fine, in the kind of voice you use when you do not want to make a small thing worse. The show does not show his death, it does not show a final breath, it simply leaves him there. And the line that Toph delivers afterwards, gently in the tunnel, makes it clear that he is not going to be fine because Toph is lying. The show, again, declines to lecture. It just lets you understand, on the walk out, that Jet is gone, that he was a teenager who lost his family to the Fire Nation when he was younger than Aang, and that the Dai Li, in their tidy chamber under the lake, took his last clear thought from him before he was killed defending people he barely knew. The disturbance of Lake Laogai is not the brainwashing itself, it is the bureaucracy of it. The neatness, the fact that someone designed that chair and someone built that lantern, and someone trained the agents to do it well, and someone somewhere in the city above signed the paperwork. The show implies, without ever quite saying it, that this is what the Earth Kingdom's long resistance to the Fire Nation has cost it. To hold the line for 100 years, the city had to become a quiet kind of fascism in its own right. The Avatar arrives in Ba Sing Se hoping for an army, and finds instead a city that has eaten itself. If the Dai Li are the human face of disturbance in Avatar, the spirit world has its own. Late in Book 1, in the long episodes around the Siege of the North, Aang is told that to save the moon and ocean spirits, he must enter the spirit world himself and find a spirit named Koh. The show, in those moments, slows down and changes register. The colors shift, the sound design opens up. And Koh, when he finally appears, is one of the most uncanny things ever animated for a Nickelodeon show. He is enormous. He is centipede-shaped. His body is a long, ringed coil of pale segments that move along the roots of a great hollow tree. And on the front of him there is a face. It is a human face, with calm, mild, almost gentle features, and it speaks softly. The face does not belong to him. He stole it. He has many. As he talks to Aang, he rotates through them the way someone might shuffle masks. There is a clown. There is a beautiful young woman. There is a monkey. There is a creature with too many teeth. He turns smoothly between them and the voice stays calm, and the camera, very deliberately, watches Aang's expression instead of the masks. Because the rule is that if Aang shows the slightest reaction, anything at all, even a tightening at the corner of his mouth, Koh will steal his face too. The encounter is short. It is also, read this way, one of the most quietly horrifying scenes in the series. The disturbance of Koh is not that he is violent. He is not. He never raises his voice. He moves slowly. He behaves in many ways like a polite host. The horror is that he is a story about how the spirit world works. The interpretation here is that Avatar spirits are not allegories for nature or for virtue or for the elements. They are alien. They have their own rules, and the rules do not care about you. Koh is interested in faces because Koh is interested in faces. There is no further reason. He has been collecting them for thousands of years, and he will collect them for thousands more. And the only protection a human has against him is to feel nothing while standing in front of him. The mythology the show is offering is older and stranger than the political story above ground, and it does not ever quite reconcile the two. Aang leaves Koh and goes back to fight a war, and the war makes sense. Koh does not make sense. He is not supposed to. And the way the show declines to soften him on a rewatch, the way the masks just keep rotating in the dark, is one of the most lasting impressions Avatar ever leaves behind. There is, much later in the second half of Book 3, another moment of horror that takes a more bodily form, and this one walks on two legs. In the search for Aang after the failed invasion, the Fire Nation hires an assassin. The group does not know his name. Sokka, in a moment of dark levity, calls him Sparky Boom Man, and that is the name they use among themselves for the rest of the run. Outside the show, in production materials and in later interviews, he is referred to as Combustion Man, and that is the name that has stuck. He is a tall, heavy figure with a long, mostly silent presence. He wears a metal arm and a metal leg. There is a third eye tattooed in the center of his forehead, and that eye is the means of his bending. He can, by focusing on a target and breathing in and exhaling through his mind, cause that target to detonate. The show is not subtle about what this looks like. He can stand on a cliff above a town and explode a rock, a roof, a person at a distance by thinking about it. There is no fire trail. There is no warning. The target simply, soundlessly comes apart. What makes Combustion Man disturbing is not just the technique, it is the calm. Combustion Man does not speak, he does not negotiate. He does not appear to take pleasure in the work, he simply walks. He tracks the group across the Earth Kingdom in the back half of Book 3, and the show stages his appearances the way a horror film stages a slasher villain, with long, quiet shots and a slow, patient gait. The group is fast, they are clever, he keeps coming. The technique itself, this targeted internal detonation, is one of the closest things the show has to outright body horror. The show implies, in offhand asides, that he is the only living person who can do it, which fits the world-building pattern of unique sub-disciplines in this universe. The way lightning, metal bending, blood bending, and energy bending are all framed as inventions or rediscoveries by a single person. And the way he dies, in a later chapter when Sokka manages a lucky shot with a small object to his forehead, is also disturbing in its own way. His own technique misfires inside his skull. He explodes. The show does not linger, but it does not pretend it did not happen. A man's mind tears him apart from the inside. That is what is offered calmly in a kid's cartoon as a death scene for an antagonist. We have spent some time with antagonists. Let us spend some time with the hero, because some of the most disturbing moments in Avatar belong to him. In the closing chapters of Book 1, during the siege of the Northern Water Tribe, the show stages one of the largest battles in the series. The Fire Nation fleet, led by Admiral Zhao, is at the gates. The city is preparing its defenders. Aang, at this point in the story, is still very young and still very afraid of his own power, and the council asks him to do what only the Avatar can do. He goes out to the ships in the bay, he carries a glider, he has, in the writing of the show, an almost desperate need to find a way to stop the slaughter without becoming a slaughterer himself. And he tries, he breaks masts, he topples a tower, he buys time, and then, in a small, easy-to-miss shot, the show lets you see what happens when a 12-year-old monk tries to do war by himself. There is a single Fire Nation soldier in a small craft. Aang knocks him into the water without thinking about it. There is a flash of the soldier's face. He does not come back up. The camera does not return to him. The show simply moves on. It is not a kill scene. It is, read this way, a portrait of how easy it is for a 12-year-old to kill someone, even by accident, even when he is trying very hard not to. In the middle of a fight he did not choose. That moment then escalates in the same set of episodes into the most explicitly destructive use of the Avatar state in the series. When Admiral Zhao kills the moon spirit, which we will come to in its own beat, the city is left without waterbending under a full moon, and Aang has to do something. The show has him merge, in a way that is essentially religious, with the spirit of the ocean. The fish in the spirit oasis joins with him. He grows. His form expands until he is taller than the city's outer wall, a great gleaming figure of water with the white tattoos still visible at the center of him walking through the bay. He flattens the fleet. The ships break. The men inside them drown. The show does not show those deaths in detail, but it does not pretend they did not happen. The argument here is that this is what the Avatar state, in its most powerful form, actually is. It is not the Avatar leading an army. It is the Avatar replacing an army. The young monk who would not knock a soldier into the water with intent is now, for several long minutes, a giant of salt water walking through ships. And the things he is doing are mostly killing things. Iroh stands on the wall and watches and says quietly, almost in awe, that this is not Aang anymore. The disturbance of the Avatar state on rewatch is that it makes the show's whole pacifist thesis difficult. Aang's culture would not have approved of what just happened. Aang himself, in his ordinary mind, would not have approved. The cosmology of the show implies that being the Avatar means being the one who carries the weight of those approvals on behalf of everyone else. And sometimes the weight tips over and a city full of soldiers ends up at the bottom of the bay. Inside that same battle is one of the genuinely strangest acts the show ever depicts, and it is one of the only moments in modern children's television to stage, in plain language, the murder of a god. Admiral Zhao, ambitious and proud, has been working on a scheme. He has learned through research in the libraries of the spirit world's history that the moon and ocean spirits at one point left their bodies and entered the mortal realm in the form of two koi fish that swim, in an eternal pattern, in a small pool inside the Northern Water Tribe's spirit oasis. The moon is the white one, the ocean is the black one. They circle each other. Waterbending, as the show has established, draws its power from the moon. So Zhao reasons that if he can kill the moon, he can break the waterbenders, and he can take the city, and after that, the world. He locates the fish, he bags it. He stands in the oasis under a sky that has visibly drained of color, and he holds a bag containing the moon. Aang and Yue and Iroh arrive. They beg him not to do it. Iroh, who is one of the great gentle figures of the series, threatens him in a tone that is, briefly, terrifying. Zhao does it anyway. He stabs the fish. The sky turns a deep, sick red. The moon vanishes. It is one of the most cosmically frightening images in the show. The death of the moon is not a metaphor. It is depicted. A man, by knife, in a bag, kills a small fish in a pool, and a celestial body goes out. Waterbenders all over the world feel it at once. The city's bending drops, the siege tilts, and Yue, The princess of the Northern Water Tribe, who as an infant was healed by the moon spirit and given a piece of its life in order to survive, makes the decision to give that life back. She walks to the pool. She stands at the edge. She gives her life to restore the moon. The interpretation here is that this is the cleanest sacrifice in the series. A soft trade made by a teenage girl who had only just been told that this was even an option. She becomes the moon. The sky comes back. The waterbenders return to power. The fleet is undone. And Zhao, in one of the most haunting endings the show gives a villain, is dragged into the bay by the spirit of the ocean itself, calmly, almost gently, beneath the surface of the water, while Zuko reaches for him and Zhao refuses the hand. The show does not show his drowning, it just shows the water close. The argument is that some choices cannot be repaired. Zhao killed a god. The god, in turn, took him. And in the long, quiet after, the city sits under a slightly different moon than it had that morning. The new moon has a girl in it. The waterbenders, if you read the show this way, are forever bending the trace of a princess who chose to step into the sky. Slipping back to the spirit world for a moment, there is another disturbing figure in Avatar, one who is less violent than Koh, less powerful than the moon and ocean, but in some ways more interesting and more chilling, because his menace is built out of knowledge. In Book 2, in the desert chapters, the group finds a library. It belongs to a spirit named Wan Shu Tong, the Great Knowing One, an enormous black owl with white markings, who has spent thousands of years gathering every fact that humans have ever discovered. The library in the world of Avatar is one of the show's most striking pieces of design. It is buried in sand, only the upper tower is visible. The interior unfolds downward into vast halls of scrolls. There are reading rooms. There are fox spirits running the floors. And at the center is Wan Shu Tong himself, perched in the dark, watching every person who enters as if he is reading them. He greets the group with a quiet, formal politeness. He explains the rules. They are welcome to read. They are not welcome to use any of his knowledge for war. This is, of course, a problem because they are at war. They have come to the library specifically to find a piece of information that will help them turn the tide. They are looking for the date of an upcoming solar eclipse, when the Fire Nation's bending will fail for several minutes, which they intend to use as the window for an invasion. They lie to Wan Shu Tong, or they try to. They sneak off into the wing they are not supposed to enter, and the show calmly lets you watch the spirit catch them. Wan Shu Tong, in the back rooms of his own library, becomes one of the most genuinely frightening images in the series. He grows, his head turns, his eyes are larger than the group. He moves through the corridors as if he has always been able to do that. And he announces in his soft voice that since humans have, again, treated his library as a tool for slaughter, he will take it back. He will sink it into the sand. He will keep it. And he will keep them too if they cannot get out fast enough. The horror of Wan Shu Tong is, read this way, a horror about the use and abuse of knowledge. The argument is that knowing things is dangerous and that the spirits, who tend to remember what humans forget, have grown tired of being raided for blueprints. The library sinks. Appa, who is outside guarding the entrance, is taken by sandbenders during the chaos, which is itself a horror of its own. The group escapes with the date, the eclipse, the thing that the library was briefly willing to give them. And the spirit, in his vast, slow descent back into the desert, becomes a thing that has read every page in the world and concluded, with the patience of an immortal, that knowledge given to humans is knowledge wasted. He is not destroyed, he simply withdraws. And there is something almost worse about that. The idea that one of the great knowledge spirits of this world is now sealed, by his own choice, under a desert nobody crosses, with every fact ever written in his keeping. Because the people who needed those facts could not be trusted with them. The show has a lot to say about war. The library says it most quietly. If the library is the show's portrait of war's effect on knowledge, the city of Ba Sing Se, in its slow flashback chapters, gives us its portrait of war's effect on a family. There is an episode in Book 2 called Tales of Ba Sing Se, a compilation episode of short vignettes set inside the city, and one of the segments, which the show dedicates to Iroh, is one of the most heartbreaking pieces of animation in the run. Iroh, by the time we meet him, is already the wise uncle figure, the calm tea drinker, the gentle ex-general. We know from earlier mentions that he led the first major Fire Nation assault on Ba Sing Se years earlier, that he laid siege to the outer wall for 600 days, and that he turned back. The reason he turned back is given quietly in this segment. He had a son. His name was Lu Ten. Lu Ten died at Ba Sing Se. Iroh, who had been on the brink of breaking through, stopped and went home. The vignette in the city is set on what would have been Lu Ten's birthday. Iroh climbs a hill. He arranges a small picnic. He sets out objects, a portrait, a photograph, in the style of the show's painted iconography, and he speaks to it. He sings a song his son used to like. And at the end of the segment, he simply puts his head down and cries. The disturbance here is not violent. It is sustained. The show, in a series that contains gods and bending and assassins, hands you a long, quiet shot of an old man crying for a son who has been dead for years and who he never quite stopped expecting to come home. The interpretation here is that the war in Avatar is not primarily between nations, it is between generations. The Fire Nation lost an entire generation of its own children to a war it started, the show implies, and the proof of that is sitting on a hill in Ba Sing Se holding a portrait. Iroh is the moral spine of the series. He is also, the show suggests, a man who would gladly give his entire authority and reputation and tea shop and wisdom to have one more breakfast with Lu Ten. The vignette is dedicated at the end to the memory of the actor who voiced Iroh, Mako Iwamatsu, who died during production. The show, in its small text card at the end of the segment, simply offers him a goodbye. It is one of the only moments where the production world breaks through the fourth wall of Avatar, and it does so on the gentlest, saddest beat in the series. Iroh's grief is real, the actor's death is real, and the show treats both of them with a kind of quietness that is, for me, the cleanest example of what this series does well. We have lingered on grief. Let us turn to a different kind of disturbance, the kind that is enacted inside a family, in a chamber, in front of an audience. Late in Book 1, there is an episode called The Storm, which gives you the origin of Zuko's scar. The flashback structure of the episode is simple. A young Zuko, perhaps 13, is allowed to attend a war meeting in the Fire Nation capital. He is not supposed to speak. He speaks. A general proposes a tactic in which Fire Nation soldiers, all of them young and fresh recruits, will be sent forward as bait into an Earth Kingdom flank, knowing that they will die, so that a more experienced force can use the distraction to win the engagement. Zuko, who is at this point still a kind, principled boy, objects. He says in front of the entire room that the soldiers are loyal to the Fire Nation and that the Fire Nation owes them better than this. He is, by the rules of that court, deeply out of line. He spoke out of turn, he challenged a general, and the punishment for that in the world of Ozai's court is an Agni Kai, a formal fire duel. Zuko expects, when the morning comes, that he will be facing the general he insulted. He kneels in the arena, he bows his head, he waits. And when he looks up, the show stages one of the cruelest reveals in its run. The man standing across from him is not the general, it is his father. The argument the writers are making with that staging is that the offense Zuko committed was not against the general at all. It was against Ozai. By caring about the soldiers, by speaking up for them, by behaving like a person with a conscience inside the Fire Nation War Council, Zuko showed his father what kind of son he was. And Ozai, who had been hoping for a different kind of son for a long time, decided to correct that in front of everyone. The show then does what it does best with horror, which is to imply rather than depict. Zuko refuses to fight. He drops to the floor. He begs his father. He cries. And Ozai, who is taller than him, places one open hand on the side of his son's face and burns him with it. The flame is shown briefly. The aftermath is not. The next time we see Zuko, in the present tense of the show, he wears the scar. He is a 13-year-old who was disfigured by his father in public in a sanctioned duel that he tried to decline for the offense of objecting to the deaths of Fire Nation teenagers. That is the founding wound of one of the show's main characters, and the show, in The Storm and again in flashbacks across all 3 books, is unflinching about what happened. What makes Zuko's scar one of the most disturbing things in Avatar is that it travels with him. It is not a single shock. It is on the screen for every second of his life. The character design refuses to let you forget, and the show, in its smaller moments, often returns to it. There is a scene in Book 3, in the beach, where Zuko stands at the edge of a small social gathering of Fire Nation teenagers and tries to be ordinary, and the scar is just there, on the wrong side of his face, in soft summer light. There is a scene at the Boiling Rock prison where he speaks to his father through bars, and the scar is the side facing the camera, the side facing his father. The interpretation here is that the writers are making a long argument about inheritance. Ozai's project is to keep marking his children, by hand or by ambition or by neglect, and Zuko's slow arc out of that family is, in some sense, the slow project of refusing to mark his own. The disturbance is not the moment of burning. The disturbance is the years that follow. Zuko's family, of course, contains another horror, and we should sit with her for a while. Azula, the younger sister, is presented to us in Book 2 as one of the most polished antagonists the show ever produces. She is brilliant. She is precise. Her bending, blue lightning, is the result of a discipline most Fire Nation prodigies cannot match. She walks into rooms and people leave them. She is the daughter Ozai wanted, and the show is, again, careful not to soften that. Azula is loved at home. Zuko is not. The interpretation here is that one of them was nurtured into a weapon and one of them was rejected, and the rejected one ended up with a conscience, while the nurtured one ended up with very little to stand on once the nurture withdrew. We see Azula at her peak in the long Ba Sing Se campaign, where she conquers a city the size of a country through manipulation rather than force. She convinces the Dai Li, the secret police we already met, that she is the strong horse. They defect to her. The Earth King falls, the city falls. And in the underground crystal catacombs beneath Ba Sing Se, in one of the show's most stylized confrontations, she shoots her own brother through the back with lightning. The shot would have killed Aang. Katara, in one of the most desperate uses of waterbending in the series, drags him to a pool and uses healing water on the wound. And even with that, the show is clear that the strike was meant to kill, and that it nearly succeeded. What is disturbing about Azula is not, in the end, the lightning. It is the unraveling. The show takes its time. By the late chapters of Book 3, Azula has been left alone by her father. Ozai, on his way to use the Comet, has put her on the throne of the Fire Nation as Fire Lord, partly as a reward and partly as a way to keep her out of the way, and she does not register the second half of that. She is given the title, she is given the palace, and she begins almost immediately to come apart. Her two closest friends, Mai and Dai Li, betray her at the Boiling Rock. She has nobody. She begins to suspect the staff. She fires them. She fires more of them. She fires the servants, the bakers, the messengers on small perceived slights. She fires the Dai Li. She is alone in the palace, cutting her own hair in front of a mirror, hacking at it without skill, and the show watches. She sees her mother in the mirror, her mother, who in the show is not present in any straightforward sense, who left the family long ago under circumstances the original series does not fully explain. Azula sees her there. She speaks to her. She accuses her of never loving her. She throws the mirror. The mirror breaks. The argument the show is making is that the project of becoming her father's perfect daughter required her to bury something, and that with no one left to perform for, the buried thing has come up, and it is breaking her. By the time the final Agni Kai arrives, Azula is not the precise weapon she was in Book 2. She is unstable. She is laughing in the wrong places. Her bending, the blue of it, has lost some of its polish. She is matched against her brother in the courtyard on the day of Sazan's Comet, and the duel is, in places, less a fight than a kind of public collapse. She fights brilliantly in flashes, she slips in others, and when Zuko, who's on the brink of winning the duel honorably, sees her turn her lightning towards Katara, who has been watching from the side, he does the thing he was always going to do. He throws himself in the way, he takes the lightning, he survives, but barely. Katara then engages Azula in a long, terrible chase that ends with both of them on a metal grate over water, where Azula is bound by chains and ice, and the camera lingers on her. She is crying, she is screaming. There is a string of saliva, her bound body twists, and Zuko, the brother whose face she helped scar, the brother she shot through with lightning, lies a few feet away, barely conscious and bleeding. The disturbance of Azula's final image is not that she lost. It is that she is 14 years old, and that nobody in her life ever had the time or the courage to interrupt her father's project on her, and that the price of that for her is on the screen at the end. The show mercifully does not punish her further. It just leaves her there. It is one of the saddest images in any animated finale I can think of. We have already mentioned the eclipse and the failed invasion, but there is a quieter horror tucked inside that part of the show that is worth lingering on. In Book 3, in the war meeting that Zuko attends after his return to the Fire Nation court, Ozai discusses what he plans to do once the comet arrives. The room is full of generals, the maps are large, and the plan is, in plain Fire Nation language, a campaign of total destruction across the Earth Kingdom. The argument made openly is that the Earth Kingdom has resisted them for 100 years because there is always a village left to flee to, a forest to hide in, a coastline to regroup on, and that this can only be solved by removing the geography itself. They will fly the airships, they will rain fire from above, they will burn the forests, the towns, the farms, they will leave the continent uninhabitable. The Fire Nation will then be the only nation on a scorched world. The show calmly lets the room agree to this. Generals nod, there is a kind of polite quiet. And Zuko, who has been raised on this language his entire life, sits at the table while the plan is described, and you can see in his face the moment it crystallizes into something he can no longer accept. The disturbance of that war meeting is not the plan exactly, it is the room. It is the chairs. It is the orderly way that genocide is discussed by people who have done it before and who are confident they will do it again. The Fire Nation in Avatar is not a chaotic empire, it is a bureaucracy with a research department. That is the point, and it is the most quietly horrifying thing the show ever lets you see about its main antagonist nation. The plan to use the comet is the long shadow of the show, the second act of a project Sozin began 100 years earlier. The show, by the time of the finale, has spent significant time on Sozin himself. There is an episode called The Avatar and the Fire Lord in Book 3, narrated in 2 flashbacks, one for Aang and one for Zuko, that lays out exactly how the 100-Year War began. Sozin and the previous Avatar, Roku, were childhood friends. They grew up together in the Fire Nation. Roku discovered on his 16th birthday that he was the next Avatar. They went their separate ways. Sozin, over the decades, developed an idea that the Fire Nation was so prosperous that it owed it to the world to share, by force, that prosperity. Roku refused him. There was a confrontation. Roku, in their middle age, threatened Sozin and let him live. Years later, when Roku's island home was destroyed by an erupting volcano, Sozin arrived, ostensibly to help, and instead left him there to die. The show stages it carefully. Roku is exhausted from holding the eruption back. He reaches out. Sozin, who could save him, looks at him for a long second. He withdraws. He flies away on his dragon. Roku suffocates in the ash. And once Roku is dead and the Avatar cycle has moved on to a newborn airbender in the Southern Air Temple, Sozin moves quickly. He waits, the show implies, only as long as it takes the comet to come around again. And when it does, he uses it to commit the Air Nomad genocide we opened with, knowing that the next Avatar must, by the rules of the cycle, be hiding among them. The horror of the Avatar and the Fire Lord is, in part, the friendship. It is that the genocide that opens this show, the one Aang lives the consequences of every day, has at its root a betrayal between 2 old friends. Sozin did not do this because Air Nomads were strangers to him. He did it because they were a target whose location he could predict. The argument the show is making is that the worst evils in this world are not abstract. They are personal. They are committed by men who know their victims, who once shared meals with them, who could have chosen otherwise at any point and chose, instead, to act. That is the deepest sentence in the show, and the writers do not let it off the hook. The Fire Nation's century of war begins with one man choosing to fly home over an old friend's body. The disturbance is in the choice, not in the magic. Within that long campaign, the show also gives us, in Book 3, what is in many ways its most emotionally violent single episode. An episode in which Katara goes looking for the man who murdered her mother. The episode is called The Southern Raiders. The mother in question, Kaya, was killed during a Fire Nation raid on the Southern Water Tribe when Katara was a small child. We have known this since Book 1. The show, with patience, has been holding it. In The Southern Raiders, Zuko, who has by this point joined the group, comes to Katara with a name. He has done the work, he has the records. The man who led the raid on the Southern Water Tribe that day was a captain named Yon-Ra. He is still alive, he is retired, he lives in a small house in the mountains, he could be found. The show then dedicates a full episode to that finding. What is disturbing about the Southern Raiders is not the journey. It is the moment of arrival. Katara and Zuko find Yon-Ra. He is an old man. He is in clothes much smaller than his presence in her memory. He bends over a basket of vegetables in the rain. He drops something. He picks it up. And when Katara confronts him, when the rain is on her face and the lightning above her is at her command, the show stages the scene with extraordinary patience. Katara remembers her mother in the doorway of their tent on the day of the raid. The show plays it for us. Kaya tells the soldier she is the waterbender. She is not. Katara is, even at that age. Kaya is lying to spare her daughter because she knows what the Fire Nation soldier is there to do. Yon-Ra kills her. He walks past Katara, who has hidden, and out of the tent. Kaya dies in the snow. That is the wound the show has been carrying since the very first chapters. And here, in the rain, in front of an old man who barely remembers her, Katara has to choose. She does not kill him. She gets very close. She raises water. She stops it in the air. The blood in his body, which the show has made very clear she now knows how to move, does not have to be moved. She lets him sob. She tells him in lines the show treats with great care that he is not even worth doing it. She walks away. He survives. The disturbance here is not catharsis. It is the absence of catharsis. The argument the show is making is that revenge does not heal the wound, and that what Katara needed on the road to that mountain was to look at the man and find him small. He is small. He is afraid. He cannot even remember her mother's name. And Katara, after the scene, sits with Aang at the edge of a cliff and tells him that she did not forgive Yon-Ra, but she is somehow ready to forgive Zuko, who has the burden of his own family's actions on his head. The show implies with that line that forgiveness in this world is something you give to the people who are still close enough to take it, not the people who have already removed themselves from your life. Yon-Ra is left in the rain. Kaya is still dead. The show does not pretend either of these is fixed. It just lets Katara walk away. The boiling rock, which the show gives us a couple of episodes earlier in Book 3, is in its own way a study of the everyday horror of the Fire Nation. The prison is built inside a volcano on an island in the middle of a boiling lake. The lake itself is hot enough to cook anyone who falls into it. The walls are metal. The guards are skilled benders. The prisoners include earthbenders and waterbenders kept far from their elements. Civilians who said the wrong thing in the wrong street. And now, in this stretch of the series, the captured leaders of the failed invasion of the Day of Black Sun, including Sokka and Katara's father Hakoda, and the warrior Suki. Zuko and Sokka infiltrate it. They pose as a new guard and a new prisoner. And what the show shows you on the way in is not torture in the cartoonish sense. It is the small, bureaucratic cruelties of a long incarceration system. There are head counts, there are showers, there are mealtime privileges. There are misbehaving prisoners who are placed in coolers, small windowless boxes that drop their temperature below freezing, where they are kept until they apologize. The argument the show is making is that the Fire Nation does not run a war and a peaceful nation. It runs a war as a peaceful nation. The same logic that designed the work camp designed the school day. The same hands that signed the Comet order signed the prison manifest. And the disturbance of the boiling rock is that, in design, in color, in the way the guards talk to one another at the staff meeting, it could be the entry hall of a moderately sized office building. The bureaucracy of cruelty is the disturbance again. There is one more piece of the prison story worth lingering on. Mai and Dai Li, Azula's two friends, intervene at the climax of the escape to save Zuko's life. They are imprisoned for it. They are sent eventually to the boiling rock themselves. The show is honest about what that means. Azula, when she learns about it, does not lift a hand to help them. They were her closest companions for years, and the moment they showed her any independent loyalty, they were moved into the system she had built. By the time of her unraveling in the palace, that is one of the things she is grieving without admitting to herself. She was always going to send them there if they crossed her. They knew that. They did it anyway. And the disturbance of that quiet network of relationships is, again, the inheritance. Azula's family treated her as a weapon. She treated her friends as instruments. Her friends were people anyway. And that, in the end, was the only ladder out of that family that anyone built. Inside that family also lives the missing piece, the mother. The original series, the one we are sticking to in this script, does not show us Ursa, Zuko, and Azula's mother in the present tense. She is gone. She has been gone for a long time. The show drops in flashbacks the moment of her disappearance. There is a memory of a younger Zuko in his room in the night with his mother bending over him. She tells him to remember who he is, no matter what happens. She leaves. The show implies through Zuko's father in a later confrontation that Ursa did something to save Zuko's life, that she took an action that may have involved violence against the Fire Lord at the time, Azula, in order to keep her son safe, and that she was banished or sent away as a result. The original series leaves the matter at that. The argument the show is making is that the absence is what shapes the children. Azula remembers her mother as having loved Zuko more. Zuko remembers his mother as the last person in the household who treated him as a person. Both of those memories are doing work in the children's adult choices. And the show, mercifully, does not tie it up too neatly. It just lets the absence sit. There is a sequence at the very end of the series where Zuko, now Fire Lord, visits his father in prison and asks him calmly what he did with Ursa. The show cuts away on the question. Whatever the answer is, it is left, in the original series, off-screen. The disturbance of the missing mother is that she stays missing. Wider out in the Fire Nation, the show takes time to depict the everyday machinery of the Empire on the children who live inside it. In Book 3, in an episode called The Headband, Aang accidentally enrolls himself in a Fire Nation school in the colonies. The lesson is on the history of Fire Lord Sazin's wars. The teacher, a tidy woman with a calm voice, tells the class that the Air Nomad army attacked first, that they were aggressive, that the Fire Nation was responding to centuries of provocation from a militant Air Nomad threat. The show is gentle in how it shows this. The children, 8 or 9 years old, are nodding. They take notes. There is a quiz. The argument the show is making is that the genocide is not only an event, it is a textbook. The Fire Nation built a story that allowed its own children to live inside the consequences of that genocide without ever feeling that anything had been done wrong. The Air Nomad army, of course, did not exist. The Air Nomads were monks. There were perhaps a few thousand of them scattered across 4 mountain temples with no military force at all. The show does not need to say this out loud. The viewer already knows. The disturbance of the Fire Nation school is that the children in it are not malicious. They are simply being raised inside a story their parents and grandparents inherited from people who needed it to be true. That is, read this way, the show's clearest portrait of how a nation moves through atrocity into ordinary life. There are smaller scenes inside Book 1 and Book 2 that are, in their own quiet way, harder to shake than the large set pieces, and we should give them their time. In an early Book 1 episode called The Cave of Two Lovers, the group has to cross a mountain by way of an underground network of tunnels said to be older than the war, and older in fact than most of the histories of the kingdoms. The frame story is a song. A wandering troupe of nomads sings them a piece about 2 lovers, Oma and Shu, who came from opposing villages, who learned the original earthbending from the badger moles in the caves, and who used those tunnels to meet each other in secret. The episode is, on first impression, one of the lighter ones of the season. There is humor. The nomads sing badly. The group gets lost. And then the tone tips gently when the show begins to show you what is in the tunnels. There are skeletons. Not many, not arranged for shock. Just a few, mostly partial, found by torchlight as the group wanders through chambers that the tunnels have closed and opened around them over the centuries. The interpretation here is that the tunnels are old, that they are a labyrinth, and that they were never a safe route. Many people who used them did not come out. The lovers themselves in the legend were able to navigate because they learned earthbending and could shape the path. Other travelers over the years did not have that. The skeletons are the evidence. The episode does not dwell. The group eventually finds the central chamber with the tomb of the lovers themselves, and they get out by allowing themselves to feel something the legend says will guide the path. They are humming the song. They are looking at the painting of the embrace. The badger moles, it turns out, are still there, larger than horses, blind, gentle, and they show them the way out. But on the way back, the show does not forget the bones. The disturbance of the Cave of Two Lovers is that this is a love story, and that the love story has corpses in it, and that the show is not in a hurry to clarify the relationship between the two. The argument is the same one that runs through the series. Tenderness in this world is built on top of older losses. The tunnels do not lie about that. In Book 2, there is an episode called Zuko Alone that is, in its own way, one of the show's most uncomfortable single chapters because it is small. Zuko, exiled from the family in the present tense of the show, rides into an Earth Kingdom village under a false name and tries to be useful. The episode is, by design, a riff on a particular kind of Western. He helps a family, he fixes something, he earns their meal. He even, in his quietness, finds a kind of warmth that the show has not yet allowed him to feel. and then a small group of Earth Kingdom soldiers who in this town have taken on the role less of defenders and more of local extortionists, decide that he has overstepped. They confront him in the center of the village. They have the boy of the family he has been helping with them, a small earthbending boy who has been growing into his own gift in front of Zuko. They threaten the boy, they are about to hurt him. And Zuko, who has been hiding both his identity and his bending, draws his swords and fights them off. And then, when one of them comes close to killing him, he uses his fire. He reveals himself. The fire comes out. The villagers, who have been kind to him, who have been calling him by the false name, see him for what he is. The earthbending boy, who had begun to look at him like an older brother, recoils. And the mother of the family, who had fed him at her table, the woman whose home he had begun, in his way, to need, simply tells him to leave. The show does not condemn her, she is correct. He is Fire Nation. Her father-in-law lies dying inside the house because of soldiers wearing the same red. The argument the show is making is that Zuko's path back from being his father's son is going to be long, and that the world will not, for a long time, recognize the work he has done on himself because the uniform he carries on his face will arrive in any room before he does. The disturbance of Zuko alone is not a scene of violence, although there is one. It is the moment after, the long ride out of the village, with the boy who used to look at him with admiration, now standing in the doorway with the same fear as everyone else. The show, in those last shots, lets you sit with that. Zuko has saved their lives. He is also, in the only meaningful sense available to them, one of the soldiers who has been hurting their family for years. Both of those things are true. The episode ends with him on the road again, alone on the ostrich horse, riding past the family in the windows. He has another country to walk through. He has, the show implies, another decade of these walks ahead of him before anyone will see his face without flinching. The Painted Lady in Book 3 gives us one of the show's most direct portraits of what the Fire Nation actually looks like at scale, on the ground, away from the palace and the war meetings. The group is traveling through a Fire Nation river country and stops in a small fishing village. The village is sick, the children have a cough, the water is foul. There is, at the edge of the river, a Fire Nation military factory. It produces, the show implies, supplies and weapons. The runoff goes into the river. The river feeds the village. The fish are sick. The people are sick. And the local soldiers, who are bored, occasionally extort the villagers for what little food is left. The show lays out the situation calmly. Nobody is doing anything overtly dramatic. There is no individual villain to fight. There is instead a system. A factory built where it should not have been built. Soldiers stationed where they should not be stationed. A spiritual figure called the Painted Lady, half remembered in local stories, who is said once to have protected the villagers and who has apparently abandoned them in recent years. Katara on her own decides that this cannot stand. She puts on a disguise. She makes herself the Painted Lady. She heals the children. She moves at night. She brings food. She makes the soldiers run from her in their own camp. And eventually, in one of the most quietly satisfying acts of sabotage in the series, she destroys the factory. She floods it. She breaks its pipes. The river is allowed to clear. The interpretation here is that the show is making very deliberately an argument about the kind of heroism that does not appear on a war room map. Aang's quest will, in the end, win the war. Katara's intervention at this village, which only the 4 of them in the village will ever remember, is the cleanest single act of relief any of them performs across the run. The disturbance of the Painted Lady is not in the disguise or the trick. It is in the cough. It is in the child the show shows you at the start of the episode who is too tired even to look up, who lives in a house at the river's edge, whose parents have no way of stopping it. The Fire Nation, the show is saying, is not only burning villages. It is also poisoning rivers, and the children in the riverside houses are dying anyway. And nobody from the palace has ever, in 100 years, come down to count them. The Painted Lady saves them for one night by being one woman with a disguise and a temper. That is, in the show's argument, often what good actually looks like. In a Book 1 episode called Imprisoned, the show gives us its earliest portrait of the same machine, in a more straightforward setting. The group finds a small Earth Kingdom town under Fire Nation occupation. Earthbending has been outlawed in the town. The show, in a small touch, has the local boy, a teenager, do an act of earthbending in secret, and his neighbor reports him. He is taken away, the group follows. He is being held on a Fire Nation prison rig in the middle of the ocean, a great metal platform floating in the water. designed specifically to neutralize earthbenders by keeping them at all times off the ground. They are surrounded by sea. The deck under their feet is metal. There is no earth. The show makes the architecture the punishment. There is no torture. There is no overt cruelty. There is simply a flat metal floor and the open horizon day after day with the bending out of reach. What the show is suggesting here is that the Fire Nation, again, designs its prisons as language. The boiling rock much later will do the same for waterbenders. The metal rig does it for earthbenders. Katara, in a small speech to the prisoners on the deck, eventually gets them to understand that the rig itself is fueled by an enormous store of coal, that the coal was once earth that they can call to it, and they break the rig from inside. The disturbance is that they had been there for so long without realizing it. The Fire Nation had built a prison whose only condition for working was that the prisoners stop trying. If Imprisoned is the show's first portrait of the war's effect on earthbenders, the Mechanist's Tower in Book 1 is its first portrait of the war's effect on engineering. The group, returning to the Northern Air Temple, finds it occupied not by airbenders who are all dead, but by a community of refugees led by an inventor called the Mechanist. The Mechanist has, with his community, taken up residence in the temples. They have built devices. They have weatherproofed the buildings. There is a kind of life there. And then the show begins, slowly, to reveal what the Mechanist has been doing. He has been making weapons. He has been making them in secret for the Fire Nation because the Fire Nation has his son, and the price of his son's safety is a steady production of new tools of war. The Mechanist is not, in the writing, a villain. He is a tired man who made a deal he did not want to make. The argument the show is making is that the war's reach into the Earth Kingdom is wide enough that it touches even the people who think they are hiding in old temples in the mountains. The disturbance of the Mechanist's story is that he is a craftsman and that his craft has been bent towards harm, and that the show, in its last shots of him with his son on the parapet, lets you understand that the choice he made was not, in the moment, a choice. The Fire Nation does not need to threaten everyone. It only needs to find each person's son. A later, lighter version of the same point arrives in the form of Zhong Zhong, a Fire Nation deserter and former admiral who Aang seeks out for firebending training in Book 1. Zhong Zhong is one of the strangest figures in the series because the show, having spent most of its time telling you that fire is a beautiful and warming thing under the right hands, here introduces a man whose every line is a warning against fire. He is afraid of his own gift. He sits in the forest by a small flame and tells Aang that fire is a curse, that it consumes, that without the discipline of decades, the bender will use it to hurt other people without meaning to. Aang ignores him. Aang, as usual, is excited. He produces fire. He loses control. He burns Katara's hands. Katara, who is a healer, ends up healing herself. The show mercifully does this without making her permanently scarred, but the moment is staged with extraordinary patience. Aang's face, when he sees what he has done, is one of the cleanest portraits of self-horror the show ever gives him. Zhong Zhong sits at the edge of the frame and says nothing. The interpretation here is that the show is making, gently, one of its bigger arguments. The Avatar's power is not, in the end, mostly about whether he is right. It is about whether he is patient. Fire, in the world of Avatar, is in some sense the same thing as anger. And anger in a powerful person tends to find the person they love, least the deserving of it. Zhong Zhong knows this because Zhong Zhong has had a long career being asked to use his anger by his nation. He has stepped out of the war because he no longer trusts himself. And the disturbance of Zhong Zhong's small camp in the woods is that he is correct and that the show, in its later books, will continue to bear him out. Fire used carelessly hurts the people you love. Aang spends 3 books learning that lesson the slow way. We have moved sideways for a while. Let us come back to the central spine of the show, and to one of the most quietly devastating arcs in the run, which is the one about Appa, the sky bison, the great 6-legged white animal who carries the group from place to place and who, in the writing of the show, occupies the place in Aang's life that his Air Nomad family once did, is taken from him at the end of Book 2, in the desert chapters around the library. The library sinks into the sand, as we have already discussed. While the group is inside, fighting for their lives, Appa is on the surface, alone, in the heat. A group of sandbenders find him. They harness him. They take him. The show then dedicates one of its strangest single episodes called Appa's Lost Days to the months that follow. We follow Appa across the Earth Kingdom. We watch him pass through the hands of traders, of circus owners, of cruel men with whips, of children who try to be kind to him and are taken from him by their own elders, of empty fields where he sleeps alone. He is, the show implies, frightened. He is exhausted. He is, by the end of his journey, almost broken. And the writers stage all of this with extraordinary restraint. There is barely any human dialogue. The episode is almost a silent film. The disturbance of Appa's lost days is not, in the end, in any single act of cruelty. It is in the duration. It is in the fact that the show, in the middle of its biggest war plot, sets aside an entire chapter to remind you that the world does not stop being cruel just because the war does not happen to be visible from where you are standing. Appa is not, in the strict sense, a casualty of the 100-Year War. He is a casualty of the way the world has been allowed to operate under the cover of that war for 100 years. The traders that move him from town to town are not soldiers. They are profiteers. They are what the world has built underneath the war. The aftermath of Appa's loss is felt across the rest of the desert arc, and the show is honest about what it does to Aang. There is a stretch of episodes where Aang is genuinely cruel for the first time in the series. He snaps at his friends, he withholds water, he goes silent for long stretches. And in the chase to find Appa, he ends up in the same desert, and he uses the Avatar state, and the show implies, with extraordinary care, that what he does in those moments is not entirely under his control. He attacks the sandbenders, he yells, he nearly hurts people he should not hurt. Katara, in the end, places a hand on his arm. The light goes out of his tattoos. He comes back. The argument the show is making is that Aang's gentleness, which is real and which he has worked at for centuries through the cycle, is not by itself a guarantee. The Avatar state is something else. The grief that triggers it is something else. And the disturbance of the desert arc is that we see Aang, who is in some sense the show's promise of mercy, become briefly someone we do not recognize because somebody took the closest thing he had to a family. The same set of arcs ends in Ba Sing Se in the catacombs under the city, where Aang dies. The show does not, in its first telling, ever quite say this out loud, but the structure is unmistakable. Azula, in the crystal catacombs at the end of Book 2, fires lightning at Aang while he is in the Avatar state, just as he is opening the last of his chakras, which the Guru in earlier episodes told him would let him control the state completely. The lightning hits him, he falls. Katara catches him. He is not breathing in the meaningful sense. She uses the small flask of water from the spirit oasis, which she has been carrying for the entire season, and she brings him back. He sleeps for weeks. He wakes on a Fire Nation ship in disguise. And the show, in a quiet conversation with a vision of Avatar Roku later in Book 3, tells you what almost happened. If Aang had died in that moment in the Avatar state, the cycle would have ended. There would be no next Avatar. The line would have been cut. The argument the show is making in that small piece of cosmology is that the entire balance of this world rests on a thread that Azula very nearly snipped, and that the only reason it did not snip was a flask of water and a healer who happened to know how to use it. The disturbance of the catacombs is not the fight. It is the brittleness. The show is telling you calmly that this whole project could have ended in Ba Sing Se, and that nobody outside the four of them would have known what they had lost. It is worth pausing on Toph for a moment because her family also offers the show one of its most subtly disturbing portraits. Toph is the daughter of the Beifong family, an enormously wealthy household in the south of the Earth Kingdom. She is blind. She is in fact one of the most powerful earthbenders alive. She has learned bending from the badger moles, the same blind creatures Oma and Shu learned from in the older legend, and the show takes pains to make it clear that her bending is, in some ways, beyond that of any teacher she could have been given. Her parents do not know this. The argument the writing makes about them is that they love her in their fashion, but that their love has the shape of a cage. They have kept her hidden from the world. They have kept her bending hidden from her father. They have presented her in their estate as a small fragile child because her blindness convinced them, when she was very young, that fragility was her permanent condition. The show stages this beautifully. There is a banquet. There is a polite earthbending master who teaches her tiny moves. There is a small space the size of a courtyard where she is, at all times, observed. And then she leaves with the group, and the family hires bounty hunters to retrieve her. The two bounty hunters they hire are striking minor characters in their own way. Master Yu, who had been her earthbending tutor, agrees to take the work for the money. Xin Fu, the organizer of the underground earthbending arena where Toph had been quietly winning matches behind her parents' backs, is the more imposing of the pair. They take the work seriously. And what happens in the Toph arc is that her parents, who have spent their daughter's life convinced they were protecting her, end up paying mercenaries to drag her home. The show is careful in the writing. They are not villains, they are not monsters, they are simply the kind of love that has refused for many years to update on what its object is actually like. When Toph eventually returns to them in Book 2, briefly, the conversation goes badly because they have not changed. The disturbance of the Beifong household is that some of the hardest harms to undo are committed by people who think they are helping. Toph leaves, again, with her friends. Her parents stay in the house. The show does not reconcile them. The argument is that some children sometimes have to outgrow the people who raised them, and that the outgrowth is not painless and is not, in any clean way, fair. Toph carries the Beifong name. She also leaves the Beifong house. Both of those facts coexist for the rest of the run. There is a Book 3 episode that touches on a related kind of horror in the Fire Nation, which is the way the war has shaped childhood across all three nations. In The Beach, the 4 Fire Nation teenagers, Zuko, Azula, Mai, and Dai Li, are sent on what is essentially a forced vacation to the royal family's private island, where the show, in one of its most surprising tonal shifts, gives them a kind of high school drama beat. They go to a party, they argue, they walk on a beach, and in the center of the episode, around a small fire, they each tell each other in a series of quiet, almost broken confessions what their childhoods were like. Mai, whose face has always been controlled and whose hands rest folded in her lap, says that she was told from a very young age that she was not allowed to feel anything because her father was rising in politics and her behavior could embarrass him. Dai Li says that she grew up as one of 7 identical sisters and ran away to the circus because it was the only place where she could be herself, alone. Azula says, almost casually, that her mother thought she was a monster. The show does not soften this. Azula's mother thought she was a monster. The line is delivered without an inflection. The argument the writers are making is that the Fire Nation aristocracy has been raising its children inside the same machinery that runs its prisons. The 4 of them are not by birth evil. They are, by upbringing, deeply unwell. The disturbance of the beach is the tenderness. The 4 of them, in those small moments around the fire, are almost kind to each other. The show then takes that kindness and lets it fail, because the political project they belong to is too large, and by the end of the run they will be on different sides of the same fight, and Mai will be in prison, and Azula will be in a cell of her own making, and Dai Li will be a circus girl in a cell of stone. The childhood they describe at the fire produces, 3 books later, 4 people who can no longer be in a room together. There is also, in Book 1, a particular small episode that is sometimes overlooked in conversations about disturbing moments, and that is the one called Winter Solstice, where the group encounters the spirit Hei Bai. The setting is a village at the edge of a forest. The forest is dying, the trees have been burned by the Fire Nation, and a spirit, in retaliation, has been emerging from the woods and taking the villagers one by one. The show stages it in shadow. The spirit is, in its first form, a great black ape with white markings. It moves quickly, it walks through the village, it picks up people, including, in one of the more upsetting moments of the early run, an older brother carrying his younger sibling, and the older brother is taken into the forest. The villagers are huddled in a temple. They do not know what to do. Aang, who has only just begun to understand his role as a bridge between the human and spirit worlds, goes out to meet the spirit. He nearly fails. He is taken into the spirit world himself. And what the show is implying in that whole arc is that the war is not only a war between human nations, it is also a war that has, over decades, frayed the relationship between humans and spirits. Forests that the spirits used to share were burned. Animals that the spirits used to inhabit were killed. The spirits, in their turn, have begun to come into villages and take what they can. The disturbance of Hei Bai is not the spirit, who is, in the end, calmed by Aang and revealed to be in pain rather than in malice. It is the village which has lost an older brother and a younger one and a father, and which by the end of the episode does not get any of them back. The spirit, after the calming, returns them. The show, in this case, is merciful. But the village will, the implication is, lose more before the war ends, because the forest is still dying, and the next spirit in the next year may not be as easily reached. There is also, on the topic of the spirit world, one further encounter that is worth holding. The avatar Roku, in his appearances in the show, is depicted as a calm, mostly gentle figure who tries to help Aang understand the cycle of the avatar. But there is a sequence, late in Book 3, in which the show takes the time to depict, in flashback, his actual death. Roku is on his island. The volcano is erupting. He has held it back for as long as a single avatar can hold a volcano back. He is exhausted. He is reaching for Sazin, his old friend. Sazin is, as we have already discussed, present, and the show shows us the moment by moment of his abandonment. Sazin lifts off the ground on the back of his dragon. Roku falls to one knee. The ash begins. The show closes on his face in the ash, eyes still open. It is one of the very few times in the series in which the camera holds steadily on the moment of a major character's death. Roku does not die in battle. He dies on his porch. He dies of his oldest friend deciding not to save him. And the disturbance of Roku's death in the back half of Book 3 is that it lays the foundation for every grief that follows. The Air Nomad genocide was made possible by Roku's death. The 100-Year War was made possible by Roku's death. And the show, in its calm way, lets you understand that the thing that killed Roku was not a weapon. It was a friend who, when the time came, decided not to put his hand out. Inside Book 2, there is also one of the show's most direct portraits of total war on civilian space, and that is the episode called The Drill. The Fire Nation, having spent the early part of the season trying and failing to break Ba Sing Se from the outside, finally arrives at the wall with a piece of equipment that the show treats less like a weapon and more like a slow-moving event. The drill is enormous. It is the height of the wall itself. It is a moving city, in essence, propelled across the plain by long metal treads, with a tip the size of a small village, designed to grind through stone over a period of days. The interior is a factory. The drill's slurry, the ground rock pulped by the machine, is pumped through enormous pipes that the group, in the climax of the episode, uses to bring it down. The argument the show is making with the design of the drill is that the Fire Nation, in its war against the Earth Kingdom, has come to understand the Earth Kingdom's wall as essentially a problem of engineering. The wall has held for 100 years. The Fire Nation, in turn, has spent 100 years building a machine that can chew through it. There is no negotiation. There is, in the episode, no scene of Fire Nation soldiers feeling anything about the city behind the wall. The drill simply moves. The generals on board, including Princess Azula in her first major Book 2 appearance, are professional and pleased. The disturbance of the drill is again the language. The Fire Nation does not arrive at Ba Sing Se with rage. It arrives with a project plan. There are meal times. There are duties. There is, at the center of the great moving cylinder, a tea room. And the only reason Ba Sing Se survives that episode is that 4 teenagers, including the Avatar, find a way into the pipes and break them from inside. The next year, of course, the city falls anyway by other means. But the drill is the show's clearest portrait of what total industrial war looks like in this world. And it is one of the most quietly frightening images in the run. Inside Book 1, there is another sequence that is sometimes overlooked, and that is the capture of Aang at the Po Huai stronghold by the Yuyan archers. The Yuyan in the world building of the show are a specialized unit of Fire Nation archers, whose discipline is so refined that they can, in theory, hit a target by pinning the seam of its clothing without piercing the skin. They are an elite. They are deployed by Admiral Zhao, who has decided that capturing the Avatar by skill is going to be more efficient than capturing him by force. They find Aang, they surround him, they fire. And the show, in a sequence that is one of the cleanest set pieces of the season, lets you watch Aang's clothing pinned to a tree, his glider pinned to a tree, his small body held still against the bark by a flurry of arrows that none of them are quite touching him with. He is captured without injury. He is taken to the Po Huai stronghold. He is bound at the wrists, the ankles, and the neck. He is held in a stone cell. And the show, in those moments, gives you one of its only direct portraits of Aang as the kind of prisoner of war he would actually be if he were captured. He is 12, he is in chains, he is in a Fire Nation fortress. The disturbance of the Yuyan sequence is the precision. The argument the show is making is that the Fire Nation's military, when it puts its mind to a task, is genuinely competent. Aang, the avatar of the cycle, the great hope of the 4 nations, is at this point captured cleanly by a unit of archers who have done it once and could do it again. He is only freed because Zuko, in disguise as the Blue Spirit, breaks him out for his own reasons. The Union, in a different timeline, would have delivered the Avatar to Zhao, and the show would have ended in Book 1. The thread is, again, thin. Within Book 1, there is also Jet, and we have touched on his death. But we have not touched on what he was about to do in that earlier appearance in the forest village. Jet is, when we first meet him, a teenage leader of a small group of orphans called the Freedom Fighters. They live in the trees. They are clever. They are charming. They take in Sokka and Aang and Katara for a meal. And Sokka, the only member of the group who refuses to be charmed, eventually discovers what Jet's plan is. There is, downstream of his hideout, a small Fire Nation-occupied village. The village is mostly civilians. There are children. There are Earth Kingdom civilians under Fire Nation rule. There is a small contingent of soldiers stationed there. Jet's plan is to blow the dam upstream of the village and let the flood wipe the whole village off the map. He does not, in his planning, distinguish between the Fire Nation soldiers and the civilians. He has decided, in the way that some teenagers in long wars decide, that the civilians are an acceptable cost. The show stages the confrontation with extraordinary care. Sokka tries to warn the village. Sokka is mostly correct. Jet is, in the writing, not a cartoon villain. He is a boy who watched the Fire Nation kill his entire family when he was younger than the audience of the show. He has been living in the woods for years. He has constructed in his head a theory of justice that allows him to flood a village full of strangers. The show does not pretend his pain is invalid. It does not pretend his plan is acceptable. Sokka stops it. The dam holds. Jet is left briefly on the wrong side of his own friends, including Katara, who had begun to trust him. And the disturbance of Jet's arc on rewatch is that he is, by any straightforward measure, a child. He has the same age as the leads of the show. He has, like them, suffered. He has not, like them, had the luck of someone with the patience of Iroh or the kindness of Katara walking past his treehouse and changing his mind. He has only had himself and a forest. The argument the show is making is that the war does not produce only one kind of survivor, it produces many. Aang and Katara and Sokka are one kind. Jet is another. The show is not in a hurry to redeem him, and when, in Book 2, he reappears in Ba Sing Se having been brainwashed by the Dai Li, his life ends in a tunnel. The interpretation is bleak. Jet, the show implies, never had the off-ramp. He never had the slow walk through the village, the way Sokka and Katara had. The forest, in the end, kept him. If Jet is one portrait of a particular kind of childhood inside the 100-Year War, the freedom fighters around him give the show another. Smellerbee and Longshot, two of Jet's lieutenants, are barely older than him. Pipsqueak and the Duke are barely younger. The show, in Book 2, gives us a small scene of them in Ba Sing Se after Jet's death, mourning him in a refugee camp, and the camera lingers on the smaller children's faces in the corner of the camp. And you understand, without needing the show to spell it out, that the city is full of children whose parents are dead, whose villages are gone, whose only adults are other children. The freedom fighters are, in essence, one such pod of orphans. There are, the show implies, dozens of others scattered across the Earth Kingdom. They are not, in the strict sense, soldiers. They are not, in the strict sense, refugees. They are what is left after the war has finished its work in a particular town and moved on. The disturbance of the freedom fighters is that they are not unique. They are an example. The 100-Year War has been producing them for 100 years. In Book 3, there is a quieter, gentler counterpoint to all of this, and that is the visit to the Sun Warriors. The group, looking for an authentic source of firebending for Zuko to relearn his discipline from a clean place, travels to a hidden city in the jungle. The city is supposedly abandoned. It is not. The Sun Warriors, an ancient civilization that originally learned firebending from the dragons themselves, have been hiding in the ruins for thousands of years, watching the Fire Nation grow into a thing they no longer recognize. The show treats them with great reverence. They speak in a calm, formal register. They guide Zuko and Aang through a series of trials. And at the climax of the arc, in one of the most beautiful sequences in the run, Zuko and Aang are brought to the top of a small temple, where they are told they will meet the Masters, the ones who keep the original flame alive. The show has set this up by telling you in a previous Book 2 episode and in earlier asides that the Fire Nation has hunted the dragons to extinction. That is a stated fact in the world building. Iroh in his time is said to have killed the last dragon. The Avatar Roku in his childhood was given a dragon companion. Sozin had a dragon. There were many. They are, according to the records, all gone. What the Sun Warriors reveal to Zuko and Aang at the top of that temple is that the dragons are not gone. There are two left. Iroh, who was credited with killing the last, was protecting them by spreading a story. The two dragons, Ran and Shaw, live in caves above the city, and they perform a dance of fire around Zuko and Aang, and they teach them, in the spirit of the original firebending, the truth that fire is not, in its essence, destruction. It is life. It is energy. It is warmth. And the disturbance of the Sun Warrior arc on a rewatch is the count. There are two dragons left, two across the whole world. The Fire Nation, in its 100-year project, has been exterminating the original masters of its own discipline, because the discipline, taught honestly, would have produced a different kind of firebender. The argument the show is making is that the war is not only against other nations, it is also, in some sense, against the Fire Nation's own soul. Iroh, in protecting Ran and Shaw, was protecting the only living memory of what fire was supposed to be. Zuko, on the way back down from that temple, has a kind of bending he did not have when he came up. He has learned, the show implies, from the originals. And the disturbance is that he is one of the very last people in the world who will ever get to do that, because there are two dragons left, and the timeline is, by definition, short. There is a complementary set of quiet horrors in the show that I want to gather for a moment, the kind that the script does not announce. Suki, the Kyoshi warrior who joins the group, is captured in Book 3 and held for months in Fire Nation prison. The show does not show those months. We just learn, on her return at the Boiling Rock, that she has been there. The Earth King, who is supposed to be the symbol of his country, is in Book 2 revealed to be a child by political design, kept ignorant of the war by his own court, signing decrees prepared by Long Feng on the assumption that he has no real authority of his own. He is gentle. He is honest. He is, in the writing of the show, not unintelligent. He has simply been raised in a palace where nobody told him the truth. The disturbance of the Earth King is not that he is bad. It is that an entire generation of Ba Sing Se's elite agreed, quietly, that lying to him was easier than letting him govern. The 100-Year War, the show implies, produces this everywhere. Children raised by adults who have decided, for what they tell themselves, are good reasons not to say what is happening. There is also Avatar Kuruk's story, told in a small section of dialogue with Aang in Book 1, in which Kuruk explains that his wife was taken by Koh because Kuruk was inattentive. The line is brief. The implication is heavy. Kuruk, in his time, was a powerful avatar. He was also, on his own admission, careless. He let things drift. He left his wife unprotected at a spiritual ceremony. Koh, who collects faces, took hers. Kuruk has spent every life since trying to find her. He never has. The show, in the way it stages this, does not narrate it as a tragedy in detail. It simply makes Kuruk one of the 4 past Avatar voices Aang speaks to, and it leaves the loss in his expression. The disturbance of Kuruk's story is that it sits inside the larger spirit world, where Koh still lives, where the mask of Kuruk's wife is still on his coil, where her face, somewhere in the dark, is one of the ones that rotates whenever Koh is talking to a new visitor. The show does not dwell on this. It does not have to. The image is already there. Late in Book 2, the show stages one of its most morally uncomfortable spiritual sequences in the episodes around the Guru. Aang, in pursuit of mastering the Avatar state, travels to the Eastern Air Temple to meet a man named Pathik, who promises to guide him through the 7 chakras that, in the show's mythology, are the spiritual locks holding back his full power. The chapters move slowly and gently. Pathik is kind. He speaks softly. He sits with Aang in clean rooms. And what he asks of Aang at each stage is a relinquishment: fear, shame, guilt, grief. The Guru asks Aang to look directly at the things he has been carrying and one by one set them down. The hardest of these is the last. To open the final chakra, the Guru tells Aang he must release earthly attachment. He must give up his attachment to Katara. He must accept that being the Avatar means a certain loneliness, that the cosmic responsibility cannot be carried at the same time as a particular love for a particular person. Aang refuses. The argument the show is making here is genuinely difficult. It is not, as the framing might suggest, a simple test of love. It is, in the cosmology of the show, a real cost. To be the Avatar, the Guru implies, is to give up some of what it means to be a person. And Aang, when he is about to open the last chakra, walks away from the meditation because he sees a vision of Katara in danger and refuses, in that moment, to let her go. What is disturbing about that sequence on a rewatch is what comes next. Aang flies to Ba Sing Se. He arrives in the catacombs. He goes into the Avatar state, having opened by that point only 6 chakras. Azula's lightning hits him in the middle of the 7th, and the show is explicit in Roku's later conversation with Aang that this nearly broke the Avatar cycle. The argument the show is making, gently, is that Aang's refusal to let Katara go had cosmic consequences. He could have been protected. He could have completed the path. He chose instead to save her, and that choice nearly cost everyone everything. The show, mercifully, does not punish him for that choice. It just lets it sit. The interpretation, read at full weight, is that the show believes attachment is the right thing, even when it is dangerous, and that the guru, for all his wisdom, was offering Aang a path of safety that would have been less than he was. The disturbance is that the show is honest about the cost. Aang's love for Katara is, the writers say, beautiful, and it nearly ended the world. Both things are true. The writing does not pretend the second one away. Within Book 2 and Book 3, the show also gives us, in passing, a portrait of Sokka's quieter grief. Sokka, who had been with Yue at the Northern Water Tribe, who had held her hand on the deck of the Spirit Oasis as she was preparing to give herself to the moon, watches her ascend in front of him. He has, in the writing, almost no time to process this. The next episode begins, the war continues, and the show, with great patience, keeps Yue at the edges of Sokka's plot for the rest of the run. There is a moment in Book 3, in a small episode where the group is on the road and the moon is high, in which Sokka simply looks up at the sky and is quiet for a long time. There is no dialogue. The other characters do not interrupt him. The show implies, without ever saying it out loud, that this is the kind of grief that does not announce itself. He looks at the moon looks back, he goes to sleep. The disturbance of Sokka's loss is that the show carries it without explanation. He never says her name out loud in the way you might expect. He simply, every now and then, looks at the moon. That is, the writing argues, what real grief in a young person often looks like in the long run. Not a monologue, a glance. The same restraint is at work in Aang's relationship to his own century of absence. In an early Book 1 episode, Aang reveals that the reason he ran away from the Southern Air Temple the night before he was supposed to be told he was the Avatar was that he was afraid of the responsibility, and that during that run he was caught in a storm and frozen in the iceberg. The show, in Book 3, returns to that admission. Aang carries, for most of the run, an unspoken guilt that he was supposed to be present for the war, that he was supposed to be at the temple when the Fire Nation came, that he had time to do something, and that his fear had cost the Air Nomads their lives. The show is careful, in its writing, not to let any other character punish him for this. They tell him again and again that he was 12, that he could not have known, that he was not responsible. He nods, he carries the guilt anyway. The argument the show is making is that some kinds of survivor's grief are not amenable to argument. You can be told you are not responsible. You can know factually that you are not responsible. You can still, in the quiet moments, believe that you are. The disturbance of Aang's 100-year nap is that the world moved through a century without him, and that in his head, no matter what anyone tells him, that is partly his fault. The show lets him sit with that. It does not erase it. In Book 3, there is a small, almost comic episode called Nightmares and Daydreams in the days before the failed invasion of the Day of Black Sun. Aang has not been sleeping. He is, on screen, visibly unwell. The episode is staged largely as a series of his hallucinations. He imagines Katara wrapped in fish armor, taking the place of the moon. He imagines Sokka chewing on his own staff. He imagines Ozai, very tall, telling him that he is going to fail. The episode is, in places, funny. It is also, in others, one of the more genuinely uncomfortable single chapters of the season, because what the show is depicting is a teenager preparing for combat with a man he is not, in his core, prepared to fight. Aang has been a vegetarian his entire life. He has, in his head, an absolute aversion to killing. He is, in 3 days, going to be expected to walk into the Fire Lord's palace and end him. He has, of course, no idea how to do that. He has, in fact, been pushing it out of his mind for the entire season. The hallucinations are the price of that pushing. The disturbance of Nightmares and Daydreams is the way the show frames Aang's gentleness as a structural problem. The argument the writers are making is that Aang is, in his soul, the wrong person for the war the world has decided to ask him to end. He is the only person who can end it. He is also, by upbringing, by belief, by every value the Air Nomads ever raised in him, the worst possible candidate for what the world thinks needs to happen. That contradiction by the third book has begun to crack him. He cannot sleep, he cannot eat, he hallucinates his friends as enemies. He is, in the most direct sense available to the show, scared. There is one more arc in the show that I want to give time to because it is, in its way, the show's argument with itself, and that is the question of Ozai's death. Across Book 3, particularly in its last chapters, Aang is told by every adult in his life that he is going to have to kill the Fire Lord. Sokka tells him, Zuko tells him, Roku, when Aang seeks counsel in the spirit world, tells him gently that there is no other way. He says in plain language that he himself was too soft in his time with Sozin and that he should have killed his old friend when he had the chance, and that Aang must learn from that. Kyoshi, the next avatar Aang consults, is even more direct. She says with great calm that she once killed a man named Chin in defense of her island, and that she does not regret it. Kuruk and Yang Chen, the other two voices, give him the same advice in their own terms. Yang Chen, who is an air nomad like him, and whose perspective he has been hoping will save him, tells him that being the Avatar means giving up his spiritual needs for the sake of the world. He cannot, she says, hide behind his vows. The world needs him to act. He must kill Ozai. Aang refuses. He sits alone on a small island in the middle of the ocean in the days before the comet, and he refuses. He does not have, at that point, an alternative. He simply knows in some absolute way that he cannot do it. And the show, in one of its more controversial choices, gives him an alternative. A great spirit, the lion turtle, appears. It carries him for a night. It teaches him in a short and almost mystical sequence the technique of energy bending. It tells him that in the era before the Avatar, before the Four Nations, people bent the energy within themselves, and that this older form of bending allows the Avatar, in theory, to reach into the soul of another bender and remove their ability to bend at all. Aang takes the lesson. He flies to the final battle. He fights Ozai on the rocks under the red sky of the comet. And at the climax of that fight, with Ozai pinned and the comet at its peak, Aang places his hands on the Fire Lord's chest and forehead, and the energy of their two souls struggles in a great pillar of light. And Aang wins, and Ozai's bending is taken from him forever. The disturbance of that finale on a rewatch is in the close-ups. Energy bending, the show implies, is not painless for either side. Ozai's face during the procedure is one of the most genuinely frightening images in the run, because what is being removed from him is not a tool. It is a part of what he believed he was. The show has made it clear that Ozai's identity, his self-image, his entire claim to the throne, is built on his bending. To take it from him is, in some sense, to remove the part of him that he had used in the place of a soul. The procedure leaves him alive. It leaves him able to speak, to walk, to grieve. It does not leave him able to do what he has spent his life doing. The argument the show is making in choosing this resolution is that Aang's vows were not, in the end, naive. There was an answer. It was, however, a strange one, and it required the intervention of a lion turtle from before the time of the Avatars. Aang did not invent it. He received it, and the disturbance is in the way the show lets you understand, by the closing shot of the procedure, that Ozai is going to live a very long time in a small cell with the knowledge that someone else took the most important thing he had. He will not, in any clean way, recover from that. He is left alive, the show implies, partly so that he can experience the absence. That is, in its way, the cruelest thing Aang ever does in the run. The show does not pretend it is not cruel. It simply argues that given the alternatives, it was, for him, the only thing he could do without becoming someone he would not recognize. He kept his vow. He stripped a man for life. Both of those are true. Inside the same set of final chapters, Zuko's confrontation with Ozai in the prison is also worth holding. Zuko has, by the end of the series, become Fire Lord himself. He visits his father in a cell. He sits across from him, and he asks with great calm what happened to his mother. The show has, by this point, been holding that question for 3 years of broadcast time. Ozai's answer, in the original series, is cut off. The camera leaves the scene before he speaks. The choice is deliberate. The writers, the implication is, do not want to settle that question in the original run. They want to leave the absence at the center of the family. The disturbance of that final prison scene is the quietness. Zuko is no longer afraid of his father. Ozai is no longer powerful. They are simply, finally, two people in a cell, with one in chains and the other carrying the crown his father lost. The argument the show is making, in its closing image of that conversation, is that the inheritance has finally moved. The family is no longer Ozai's, it is Zuko's. The work of repair, however that is going to look, is going to be done by Zuko in conversation with a father who, in his cell, no longer has any cards. The show does not let you see that work. It just lets you see the cell and the question and Zuko walking out. There are smaller threads worth picking up before we close. In Book 2, in the chapters around Omashu, the city of King Bumi, which has been one of the great Earth Kingdom strongholds since before the 100-Year War, is shown to have fallen. The Fire Nation has occupied it. The civilians have, for the most part, been evacuated by Bumi's order. The city has been renamed, and Bumi himself, the king, is in captivity. The show stages his imprisonment with one of the strangest images in the run. He is suspended inside a small metal coffin, large enough only for him to stand in. With his head and feet protruding, he cannot move his arms, he cannot move his legs. He is held in place by the metal in the air, because the Fire Nation, having lived with the existence of earthbenders for 100 years, has built containers for the kind that cannot be solved by simply keeping them off the floor. Bumi, who is, by his own admission and by the show's careful reveal, one of the most powerful earthbenders alive, has chosen to remain in the coffin for the entire occupation. He waits, the show implies, for the right moment, which will be the day of the eclipse, when Fire Nation bending fails and the city's recapture is possible. The disturbance of Bumi in his coffin is the calm. The show's most powerful elder is sitting alone in a metal box watching his city burn, because he has, with the patience of a man who has lived more than 100 years, decided that this is what is required. The interpretation is heavy. The 100-Year War has been long enough that even its most powerful resistors have learned to wait. Bumi's age in the show is one of the small horrors people sometimes miss. Aang's friend from 100 years before the events of the show is now an old man. Aang, in his first reunion with him, does not at first recognize him. Bumi is when they meet in his 2nd century. He is one of the only people in the world who remembers Aang as a child. He is also one of the only people in the world who remembers the Air Nomads. He, like Aang, watched everyone he grew up with die during the Comet's first arrival. He has carried that for 100 years. He has continued ruling Omashu. He has continued in his way to teach earthbenders and to maintain the city's culture. And he is, by the time we meet him, eccentric in the way that very old people who have lived through enormous grief sometimes are. The show plays his eccentricity for comedy. The argument it is making underneath the comedy is that Bumi is one of Aang's last connections to the world he lost. The disturbance is that there are only a handful of them. Bumi is one. The avatars of his past lives are another. The bones in the temples are a third. The show, by Book 3, has effectively closed the list. In the same set of chapters, the show also gives us the failed invasion of the Day of Black Sun, which is, on rewatch, one of the most unsettling sequences of Book 3 because of how cleanly it does not go right. Aang and the group, with Sokka's father Hakoda and a small coalition of Water Tribe, and Earth Kingdom, and assorted resistance fighters, land on Fire Nation soil at the start of the eclipse. They have, in theory, a few minutes of darkness during which the Fire Nation's benders cannot bend. They march on the palace. Aang descends into the throne room. He breaks through the inner sanctum. He finds the throne, and the throne is empty. Ozai is not there. Azula has already by this point anticipated the invasion plan, having extracted it via Long Feng and the Dai Li in Ba Sing Se months earlier. The royal family has decamped. They are in a bunker in the mountains. The eclipse passes. The invasion force is exposed on the Fire Nation coast with no time left and no surprise. They retreat. They are captured. Hakoda, Suki, and many others are taken to the Boiling Rock, where we eventually find them. The disturbance of the Day of Black Sun is not the violence. It is the chess. Azula, the show implies, has been moving everyone for months. The invasion was over before it began. And the children at the center of the plan, Aang and Sokka and Katara, walk back to their stolen submarine knowing that they have failed. and that they will now have to find another way. And that, of course, the comet is coming. The clock in those chapters becomes audible. There is also, inside Book 3, a single episode called The Ember Island Players that operates as a kind of meta-horror in a register the show otherwise does not use. The group, hiding out on the Fire Nation island where Zuko has his family's beach house, attends a stage adaptation of their own adventures. The play is a Fire Nation production. It is, by design, a kind of propaganda. It has been written by Fire Nation playwrights for Fire Nation audiences, and the version of the war it tells is one in which Aang is bumbling, Katara is a weepy lover, Sokka is a fool, Toph is a giant strongman, Zuko is an angsty failure, and the Fire Nation is, in the final act, glorious and triumphant. The show stages the play with extraordinary patience. The group sits in the audience. They watch themselves be misrepresented. They watch their friends die on stage. They watch, in the second act, Aang himself be killed by a stage Ozai with full lighting in front of cheering Fire Nation civilians who have, in this rendering of the show's universe, been told that the Avatar will lose the Comet battle and the war will end gloriously. The argument the writers are making with this episode is that propaganda in a war this long has been doing its own version of all of them in the imagination of their enemies for years. The Fire Nation public has been told a story. The actors on Ember Island are simply giving them a polished version of it. The disturbance of the play is the laughter. The Fire Nation audience laughs at jokes that, to the group, are a kind of small, sustained injury. They are watching themselves be made into a joke. They are also watching, in some sense, the cultural infrastructure that has made it possible for the Fire Nation to do what it has done for 100 years. If your public believes that the people you are fighting are clowns, the work of harming them becomes much easier. We should also linger on the Kyoshi warriors, whose fate is, in the show, one of the cleanest small horrors of Book 2. Suki, whom we have already discussed, leads a group of female warriors based on the island of Kyoshi, who initially encounter the group in Book 1. They are, in the writing, a skilled and disciplined elite. They wear face paint and green silk. They fight with steel fans. In Book 2, they confront Azula, Mai, and Dai Li in an Earth Kingdom town. They lose. The show, in a sequence that is sometimes overlooked, then has Azula realize that the Kyoshi warrior's uniform is an opportunity. Azula, Mai, and Dai Li dress as Kyoshi warriors. They walk into Ba Sing Se. They present themselves to the Earth King as the Kyoshi warriors. They are welcomed in. They infiltrate the palace. They are part of how the city falls. The disturbance of that arc is the way the show implies, gently, what must have happened to the actual Kyoshi warriors in the meantime. They were taken. Suki, in the back half of Book 3, is finally found in the boiling rock. The rest of the Kyoshi warriors, the show implies, are presumably in other Fire Nation cells. We do not get a check-in on most of them. They are, like a great many parts of the Fire Nation prison system, accounted for in the bureaucracy and not in the narrative. The argument the writers are making is that the cost of the war is often quiet in this way. We do not see the Kyoshi warriors months. We just see Suki at the end, in a Fire Nation guard uniform stolen from her own jailer, walking out of the volcano. The rest, we are left to assume. In Book 1, there is also a small episode called Avatar Day, set in an Earth Kingdom village called Chin Village, that turns out to be one of the show's most quietly thoughtful chapters on the moral history of the cycle. The villagers have, for generations, hated the Avatar. They burn effigies of Aang annually. They have a holiday for it. The reason, eventually revealed in the episode, is that Avatar Kyoshi, in her time, killed their ancestor Chin the Conqueror by separating their peninsula from the mainland, creating Kyoshi Island itself. Chin had been trying to conquer the village in his march across the Earth Kingdom. He had threatened the local population. Kyoshi, in the writing of the show, decided to stop him by reshaping the geography. Chin fell off the new cliff. He died. The village, for generations after, has mourned him as a martyr, having forgotten or chosen to forget what he was about to do to them. The disturbance of Avatar Day is the inheritance. The argument the writers are making is that even the Avatar's clearer decisions are remembered decades later in ways the Avatar herself did not control. Kyoshi acted in defense of a particular set of people. Those people's descendants are now mourning the man who would have enslaved them. The show implies with great calm that history is often not on the side of the people who deserve it. Kyoshi, in her time, did the right thing. Generations later, her right thing was the holiday for burning her in effigy. Aang, who has nothing to do with any of this, has to walk through the village while the locals throw things at him. The show, by the end, lets the village discover that Chin was the villain and Kyoshi was the protector. The villagers do not, however, become her admirers. They simply, the show implies, change the holiday. The 100-Year War, the show is saying in its quiet way, is not the only war the world is carrying. There are older grievances. Some of them are not, as it turns out, valid. They are still being grieved. I want to gather, near the end of this, one more set of quiet horrors that the show keeps at the edges of frame. The civilians of Ba Sing Se, after the fall of the city in Book 2, are not shown to us. The show ends the season with the leadership in disarray, the Earth King in flight, the Dai Li under Azula. We do not, in Book 3, see what life is like in Ba Sing Se for ordinary people under Fire Nation occupation. The implication is that it is grim. The implication is that the war meeting we have already discussed, in which Ozai plans to burn the Earth Kingdom from the air, is being held in part because Ba Sing Se is now, in his counting, his to do as he wishes with. The disturbance of the city's fate between Book 2 and Book 3 is the silence. The show does not give us a check-in. The city in our heads is simply held. We are left to assume the rest. The civilians of the Air Nomad temples, similarly, are present in the show only as bones. We never see the Southern Air Temple's population alive, in motion, except briefly in Aang's memory. We never see the women, the children, the elders, the artisans. We see in flashback Gyatso. We see in flashback a few of the monks. We see in one short scene Aang as a child being told he is the Avatar. The rest of the population of all 4 air temples is left in the show as an absence. The argument the writers are making in declining to flesh out that absence is that the genocide is unrepresentable. There is no scene that would do it justice. The bones in the Southern Air Temple are the most the show can show us without lying about what the loss is. The disturbance of the Air Nomads as a final beat is that the show has, by the end of Book 3, not given them voices. Aang himself is the only voice they get. He is one boy. There were thousands of them. The show is, in its restraint, telling you what the cost was. Nobody will ever know the others. There is, in this universe, no surviving Air Nomad except the boy you met in Chapter 1. I want to come back near the end to Iroh because his arc inside the prison of Ba Sing Se is one of the show's quietly disturbing portraits of how a wise man holds violence in reserve. Iroh has been captured at the end of Book 2 and is held in a Fire Nation cell during the early chapters of Book 3. The show, in a series of small moments, lets you understand what he has been doing while imprisoned. He has been eating little, he has been exercising, he has been, in some sense, preparing his body. Toph runs into him briefly in a Book 3 episode and is told in his soft register that he is doing what he needs to do. When the day of the eclipse arrives, Iroh, in his cell, does what nobody has expected him to do. He breaks the wall. Not as a metaphor, he uses his strength, which he has been developing in secret for months, and he tears through the masonry of a Fire Nation political prison with his hands. He fights his way out. He does this in the few minutes during which the Fire Nation's benders cannot bend. He vanishes from the prison the way he was supposed to vanish from the world years earlier at Ba Sing Se. The show then shows him, late in Book 3, leading the recapture of Ba Sing Se himself, in a campaign that takes a single afternoon. What is disturbing about Iroh's arc on rewatch is the implication of his earlier softness. The show has been showing you for 2 seasons an old man who drinks tea, who plays paisho, who tells parables, who hums little tunes. The argument the writers are making in the prison sequence and in the Ba Sing Se recapture is that this softness has been a choice. Iroh has always been capable of the violence he eventually performs. He has, after the death of Lu Ten, simply decided not to perform it. He has chosen tea. He has chosen kindness. He has chosen, in the slow daily way, to be a wise man instead of a general. And the disturbance is that the show implies, in the prison break, that the general is still there. He has not been disappeared by the kindness. He has been held in reserve in case the world needed him. The world on the day of the eclipse needed him. He went to work. That is one of the most thoughtful portraits of an ex-soldier I can think of in any animated series. He is, the show argues, not at peace because the violence has left him. He is at peace because he has been, daily, choosing not to use it. Both of those facts are present at the same time. They make him, in the writing, one of the more frightening, calm men in television. That same arc gives us, near the end of Book 3, one of the show's smaller and more beautiful images, when Iroh, having retaken Ba Sing Se, simply opens his tea shop again. He sits behind the counter. He pours. The Earth Kingdom soldiers, the refugees, the displaced people come in for tea. He serves them. The argument is that the work of repair after a 100-year war is going to happen in small rooms, by people who have lived through the worst of it and who have decided to make tea anyway. The disturbance, if there is one, is that this is one of the only repair scenes the show offers us. The rest of the world will, the show implies, do this work over generations or not at all. The tea shop is the model. The tea shop is also, in the writing, all that one man can do at one time. Iroh, who could have led an army across the continent, chose instead to make tea for whoever walked in. That is, the show is saying often what virtue looks like in the aftermath. There is, on the topic of the aftermath, one further beat worth holding, and that is the question of Aang's recovery from the lightning. After Azula's bolt in the catacombs, Aang spends weeks unconscious. When he wakes, he is on a Fire Nation ship in disguise. He is, however, not entirely whole. The lightning in the writing has done something to the flow of his chi. The Avatar state, for a stretch of episodes, is unreachable to him. He cannot enter it. He has, in the cosmology of the show, been broken at the spiritual level. He is afraid. He hides this from his friends. He pretends, in episodes around the failed invasion, to be steadier than he is. And it is only late in Book 3, in his confrontation with Ozai on the day of the comet, that the Avatar state is unlocked again, in a way that the show stages with great care. Aang, pinned against a rock by Ozai's fire, his body slammed back so that a small pointed outcropping presses against the scar on his back where the lightning struck him, has the chai block forced open by the impact. The light returns, the eyes go white, and the Avatar state, which had been unavailable for months, returns at full power just in time for the final fight. The disturbance of that beat is in the staging. It is, the show implies, blunt forced trauma to the original wound that unlocks the gift. Aang is hit hard in the same spot where Azula nearly killed him, and the door reopens. It is one of the more bodily moments in the show's spiritual cosmology, and the writers mercifully do not over-explain it. They simply let it happen. The Avatar state, when it returns, is the most powerful version of itself in the run. In the same final battle, the show stages one of its most quietly heroic and almost unbearable images, in the conversation between Zuko and Katara in the courtyard of the Fire Nation Palace. They have arrived together. Azula has been hiding, recovering from her unraveling. She is, when they confront her, in the middle of the Agni Kai she has demanded with Zuko. The duel is staged formally. They square off, they circle. Zuko, for most of the fight, is winning. He is calm, he is patient. He has, in the writing, made peace with the brother that Azula could have been and has accepted that he is going to have to take her down. And then Azula, in a moment that the show treats with great cruelty, breaks the rules of the duel. She turns. She aims her lightning at Katara, who has been watching from the side. The implication of the shot, in slow motion, is that she would rather take from Zuko the person he loves than be defeated cleanly. And Zuko, who has by now learned the technique of redirecting lightning that Iroh taught him in Book 2, throws himself in the path. He catches the bolt. He does not have time to redirect it properly. It enters his body. It hits him near the heart. He falls. He survives, but barely. And the disturbance of that moment is not the lightning. It is the choice. Zuko, in front of his sister in the duel that is supposed to crown him as Fire Lord, chose to be hurt rather than let Katara be hurt. He chose, in the long inheritance of his family, to break a pattern. He chose. The show holds on the shot for a long beat. The blue light fades. The smoke rises. Azula is laughing. Katara is running. We have already discussed Azula's collapse on the metal grate. We have already discussed Zuko on the courtyard. What is worth saying, in summary, is that the final hours of Avatar, The Last Airbender, are, in their own way, the most quietly disturbing stretch of the show. They are not, in the strict sense, action sequences. They are portraits of breaking. Azula is breaking, Aang is breaking and then breaking through, Zuko is breaking the family chain. Katara is in the chase with Azula, breaking the rules of waterbending in order to subdue rather than to kill. The show, in its final stretch, gives you all at once the consequences of 100 years of war on 3 royal children and 1 avatar. They are not in the end triumphant. They are exhausted. They are in places weeping. They are also mercifully alive. The show does not kill its leads. It does, however, leave them with everything they have lost and with the knowledge that they will be carrying it for the rest of their lives. The disturbance of Avatar. The Last Airbender, read as a whole, is not, I think, any single moment in any individual episode. It is the accumulation. It is the fact that by the end of the run, you have been shown a genocide, a god's murder, a bloodbender's invention of a technique inside a cell, a city brainwashed into denial, a family broken by ambition, a sibling broken by inheritance, a boy disfigured by his own father in public, a friend left to suffocate on his porch, a moon-turned princess walking into the sky, 2 dragons left in the world, an old man weeping for his son on a hill, a bison being traded between cruel men in long winter fields, an avatar who is 12 and who has been told he has to kill a man, and a final battle in which a 14-year-old girl breaks down on a metal grate because nobody in her life ever told her she did not have to be the weapon she became. The show, in its writing, never lifts those things up for shock. It simply lets them sit. The disturbance is in the layering. The disturbance is in how gently it is offered. The argument the writers are making is that the war affects everyone, that the effects do not appear on a single map, and that any honest story of a long war has to give time, in the running order, to the people in the prisons and the people in the rivers and the people in the woods and the people on the porches and the people in the cells. The show gives that time. It is, in that sense, the most quietly mature children's show I have seen. We are nearly at the end. There is one final pattern I want to give time to, because it is the show's most quiet and most consistent disturbance, and that is the way the 4 nations talk to one another in the aftermath of the war. We see, by the end of the run, a Fire Lord who is a teenager. We see an Earth King who has spent most of his life learning what his country looks like. We see a Water Tribe community that has been depleted by raids and lost a princess to the moon. We see one Air Nomad who is 12. The councils of the world, the show implies, are being run, after the war, by survivors who are barely older than the children they are meant to lead. The argument is that the 100-Year War, having killed so many of the elders of every nation, has left the work of rebuilding to people who have not, in the strict sense, had any time at all to grow up. They will do it anyway. They will try. They will, the show implies, get many things wrong. The disturbance is that they will, in the long stretch of years that follow the show's last shot, be working out how to govern a world without having had a chance to be young in it. That is the cost of a 100-Year War. That is what is left. Before we close, I want to give a little time to a handful of smaller scenes that are sometimes left off these lists, because the show puts so much weight on quiet beats that the loud beats can crowd them out. There is a flashback in Book 2 in the episode Zuko Alone of Zuko's childhood in the gardens of the Fire Nation Palace, where his mother Ursa is feeding the turtle ducks. Zuko, a small boy, is delighted by the ducklings. Azula, who is even smaller, picks up a piece of bread and throws it, hard, directly at one of the ducklings, knocking it into the water. The mother of the ducklings reacts. She is, in the writing, alarmed. Ursa, in the gentle way she does everything, picks Azula up and explains that this is not what they do. The scene is brief. It is also, on rewatch, one of the cleanest portraits in the show of what was already at work in Azula when she was very small. The argument is not that she was born wrong. The argument, read carefully, is that the family did not notice. Ursa noticed. Ozai did not. By the time of the present tense of the show, the small girl in the garden has grown into a 14-year-old who shoots lightning at her brother, and the only person in the household who might have helped her, who might have insisted that this is not what they do, is gone. The disturbance of the turtle duck scene is not the bread, it is the smallness. Whole adult cruelties begin, the show implies, in unattended moments in childhood gardens. There is also, in Book 1, the small southern water tribe village where the show opens and which is worth returning to. By the time of the show, the village is, in essence, a small community of women, children, and one teenage boy and one teenage girl. The men, including Sokka and Katara's father Hakoda, have left to fight the Fire Nation, having decided that the village can no longer afford to keep its warriors at home. The community on screen is composed almost entirely of grandmothers and children. Sokka, 15 at the start of the show, is described as the man of the village. He is not, The show implies ready. Nobody at that age would be. The disturbance on rewatch is that this is what the 100-Year War has done to the Southern Water Tribe. There used to be many waterbenders, there are now none. There used to be a large fleet. There is now one canoe. There used to be a culture. There are now a few elders and a few children in a village of igloos on a shrinking patch of ice. The fact that Sokka and Katara come out of this household at all, with the wit and gentleness and courage they bring to the world, is, in the writing of the show, almost a miracle. Their grandmother, Kana, makes it possible. The argument the writers are making is that some families, even in the worst of times, do extraordinary work simply by getting their children through the day. Kana is one of those. The disturbance is that there are not, by Book 3, many of her left. There is also the small but persistent horror of the Painted Lady Village, which we have already discussed. I want to return to it for one more beat. The child who is shown coughing in Katara's first scene in the village is, by the end of the episode, alive and recovering. Katara has flooded the factory, the river is clearing. The implication is that this particular family will, in this particular village, have a future. The implication beyond that, however, is that there are other villages. The show, in its quiet way, has made it clear that the Fire Nation has built factories like this on rivers across the Earth Kingdom and across its own colonies. There are coughing children in other towns. There are mothers exhausted by it in other huts. Katara is, in the strict sense, one waterbender in one place. She cannot, by herself, save all of them. The disturbance is not in the saving, it is in the count. The Painted Lady's miracle in the writing is shown to us, once on one river. The other rivers, the implication is, are still as they were. There is also, in Book 1, the spirit Heibai's village, which we have already discussed, but which is worth returning to as a final small image. The village is shown to us briefly before and after the visit of the spirit. We do not see it years later. The implication is that the forest will eventually recover, or it will not. The spirit may return, or it will not. The villagers will, in either case, live their lives in a smaller and more haunted form of the village they once had. The 100-Year War has, the show implies, changed even the small towns that the Fire Nation did not strictly invade, because the spirits in the woods next to those towns have changed. The disturbance of this is the indirectness. War, the show argues, does not require occupation to do damage. The simple fact of having been burned somewhere else changes the rules of the forests that did not burn. Inside all of this, the show keeps quietly returning to the children. Aang is 12, Katara is 14, Sokka is 15, Toph is 12, Zuko is 16, Azula is 14, Suki is 15. Mai and Dai Li are 15. The cast of Avatar, The Last Airbender, is, in the strict sense, a cast of children. The decisions they are making across 3 books are decisions that no children should have to make. To go to war, to kill or not kill, to take a bender's bending, to choose a sibling over a parent, to stand in front of an old man and decide whether to drown him, to save a village by trickery rather than force, to accept that your own grief is something you will, in some sense, carry forever. The show, with great patience, makes those choices the center of its storytelling. The disturbance, on a rewatch, is the persistence with which the show makes them children. It does not age them up. It does not, in its lighting or framing, ever quite let you forget that the people doing this work are small. Aang is, in the final battle, smaller than Ozai by a wide margin. Katara is, on the metal grate, smaller than Azula. Toph is, throughout, smaller than the rocks she moves. The show insists on the size difference. The interpretation here is that the 100-Year War has, by the time it produces an avatar capable of ending it, been on so long that the only people left to end it are the children of the people the war has already broken. The Avatar is 12 because the world ran out of older heroes. The Fire Lord at the end of the run is 16 because his father has done what his father has done. The disturbance is built into the casting. The world is, in the end, being saved by a group of teenagers because the world used up the people who might otherwise have done it. We have spent some time at the edges. Let us come back before we end to one of the show's most resonant single beats. The small conversation Aang has, very early in Book 1, with the Avatar Roku in the spirit world. Aang has asked Roku whether being the Avatar is, in the strict sense, a burden. Roku, in his quiet way, tells him yes, and that the burden does not lift, that even after death, the previous Avatars carry it in their own way. that the cycle is, in some sense, a chain of grief as much as a chain of power. The show, in those few lines, lays the philosophical foundation for the rest of the run. The argument is that the role of the Avatar is not a gift, it is a job. And the job is hard, and the people who hold it are not, as a rule, happy in it. Roku was not happy. Kuruk was not happy. Yangchen was not happy. Kyoshi, who lived for several hundred years and was, in the writing, formidable, would have told you herself that the role was not joyful. Aang, on his small frozen body in the iceberg at the start of the show, was running from this knowledge when he was caught in the storm. He has been, the show implies, running from it on and off ever since. And the disturbance of the cycle by the end of the run is that he has come to accept it. He carries it. He will carry it for the rest of his life. The next Avatar, after him, will carry it too. The cycle does not stop. The job does not get easier. The show, in its closing chapters, lets that sit without softening it. Aang has won the war. He has saved the world. The cycle is intact. He will, for the rest of his life, be doing this work. There is one more layer to all of this that I want to give time to, and that is the way Avatar, the Last Airbender, as a piece of craft, is constructed to let its disturbances breathe. The show, in its sound design, is unusually patient. It often, in its darkest scenes, simply lets you hear the wind. It often, in its smaller scenes, lets you hear the tea pour. The score, written by Jeremy Zuckerman and Benjamin Wynn, who in the credits work under the name The Track Team, leans on a single instrument or a single melodic line rather than on the orchestral swells you might expect from a Nickelodeon production. The composition team's training in Asian classical instruments shows. The track team and the showrunners had a relationship in which the music was often built around the silence rather than over it. The argument the show is making with that restraint is that the heaviest things in this universe deserve to be heard quietly. When Roku falls in the ash, the music does not announce his fall. When Iroh weeps on the hill, the music is a single song he is singing. When Hama smiles in the moonlight, the strings are spare. The disturbance in the show's mature beats is allowed to be in the audio of the scene itself, not in the underscoring of it. That is one of the reasons these moments stick. They are not, in the strict sense, hyped. They are presented. The audience is trusted to find them. The animation, too, made certain choices that compounded the effect. The show was animated by a number of studios over its run, including DR Movie and JM Animation and the team at MOI Animation. And the directors, particularly Giancarlo Volpe and Lauren McMullen and Dave Filoni, treated certain sequences with a level of detail that the rest of the series did not require. The lightning, the bloodbending under the full moon, the Avatar state sequences, the cave scenes, the destruction of the moon, the dragons of Ran and Shaw circling the temple, the catacombs, the energy-bending climax, the track team's swell on the final Agni Kai. The studios at the time were given the freedom to build those single scenes at a higher frame count than the show's standard, which is why the most disturbing scenes are often also, in the strict sense, the most beautiful. The show is, in its visual design, making the argument that horror in this universe is not ugly. It is, in some sense, the most attentive thing the show can show you. That is, on rewatch, one of the most interesting choices the writers and the animators ever made. The disturbing scenes in Avatar are the ones the team gave the most time to. They wanted you to remember them. That choice has, in the years since, been borne out. These scenes are, in the show's cultural memory, the ones that have lasted. It is worth holding that as a final note before we close. The show was, when it first aired, an animated series on Nickelodeon for children. It was scheduled in afternoon blocks. It competed for attention with shows about talking sponges and karate boys and animated cats. It looked, on first impression, like one of those shows. It is not, on a rewatch decades later, anything like one of those shows. It is, in its writing and its design and its sound, one of the most quietly serious works of family television ever produced in the United States. The disturbance, in the end, is that the audience was children. The argument the show was making in choosing to put genocide and bloodbending and abuse and grief into the frame of a children's series is that children can handle real stories about real costs, and that hiding those stories from them is a kind of disservice, and that a show that respects its audience will, on occasion, let them sit with something hard. That is the most respectful thing Avatar, The Last Airbender, ever did. It treated its young audience like people. It assumed they could take what the world had to give. It was, by and large, correct. If you have stayed with me to here, you are mostly through it. The disturbing moments we have spent the night with are not, in the end, the show's reason to exist. They are the foundation it lays so that the lighter moments can mean something. The bones in the temple are why the laughter at the campfire matters. The drowned ships in the bay are why the wedding at the end matters. The bloodbender in the woods is why Katara's healing matters. The brother dying against the wall is why Aang's gentleness matters. The mother in the doorway is why Yan Ra being left alive matters. The catacombs are why the courtyard matters. The 100-Year War is why the cup of tea matters. The show, in the long run, is in some sense an argument for the small kindnesses that survive the large cruelties. The cruelties are the foundation. The kindnesses are the building. Both are visible. Both are necessary. And the show, by being honest about the first, gets to be honest about the second. There is, I think, no animated series quite like Avatar: The Last Airbender. There are shows that are more visually ambitious. There are shows that are larger in scope. There are shows that are, in places, sharper. There is no animated series, as far as I have seen, that has held, over 3 books and 61 episodes, this kind of quiet attentiveness to what a long war actually does. It is a show about a boy and his lemur. It is also a show about how a nation produces a generation of children who can no longer recognize themselves. Those two things in the writing are the same project. That is perhaps the cleanest summary I can offer of what makes the show last. We have spent the night with the parts that hurt. There are also in the show parts that do not. Aang and Katara dance. Sokka makes a joke. Toph eats far too much. Iroh sings. Zuko, late in the run, smiles for the first time in years. The Earth King names his bear, which is, the show insists, a bear and not any other animal. Suki finds her group. The Mechanist makes a glider. The Cave Nomads sing badly. The dragons dance. The lion turtle carries a boy across the sea. The tea shop in Ba Sing Se opens. The credits roll on a wedding that is not, in the strict sense, on the page, but is implied in the smallness of the goodbyes. The show, in its closing moments, gives you the calm after. It does not pretend the storm was nothing. It does, however, end inside the calm. That is the gift of the run. The disturbance is real. The calm is also real. The show, with great patience, makes room for both. So as we drift to the end of this, the argument I would leave you with, if you're still awake, is that the disturbance of Avatar, The Last Airbender, is the foundation of its tenderness. The two are made of the same material. The show, by being honest about the first, earns the second. And the small acts of kindness that close the run, the dance, the tea, the wedding, the bear, the lemur on the Avatar's shoulder, are the show's argument for what survives. Not nothing, not everything, just enough. And so we settle into close. The show ends, as you will remember, on a small balcony in Ba Sing Se. Aang and Katara are there. The sky is gold. They are quiet. The camera holds. The story, for the run we have been talking about, ends there. The world is, by every measure, not yet fixed. The 4 nations have a great deal of work to do. The children we have watched will, in the years that follow, do that work as best they can. But the camera in that final shot is not on the work to come. It is on 2 of them, on the balcony in the gold light. The show, in its last image, lets you understand that this is also part of what life after the war looks like. There is the work. There is also, on a balcony, for one quiet evening, the gold light. Both are real. The disturbance, the long inheritance, the bones, the prisons, the rivers, the catacombs, the moon, the family, the friend on the porch, all of it has happened. So has this. The camera holds, the colors fade. The 100-Year War, after 100 years, is finally over. If you have been with us all the way through, thank you for staying. The show, for me, is one of the best examples I know of how a long story about a hard world can also, somehow, be a story you can fall asleep to. The voice of the run is calm. The animation is patient. The characters are kind to one another more often than they are not. Even in its hardest beats, the show holds its hand out. That, I think, is why it lasts. That's also why it makes such good company at night. The world inside it is not safe. The narrator inside it is. We have spent the night together with one of the show's heaviest threads. We have, I hope, also let some of its calmness through. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.